And I call the August 13th Planning Board to order. First on the agenda is the minutes of July 23rd.
Madam Chair, I recommend approval of the minutes of July 23rd, 2019 as corrected.
Any comment on that? May I have a second on it?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Public comment. And the public comment that we asked for is if anybody has comments of things that they'd like to see us bring up in the future, nothing that's on the agenda tonight. That will be discussed when that item comes up. So is there anybody here that has anything that they'd like to see us discuss in future? Okay, moving on. Releases. Sandlin Family Trust, Cypress Street, request for covenant release. And my understanding is that our engineering department has signed off on this. And Tom, do you have any comments?
Yes, ma'am. The engineering department, to save you the other 7 pages, at this point, the applicant has addressed the remaining concerns of engineering and recommended the planning board consider releasing any bonds or covenants for this project, which is Cypress Street, officially known as the Sandlin subdivision. But we've been out there a number of times. They had to correct a few things in the field, but they rallied, they got them corrected, and now they're up to snuff, and the engineering department says they have no issues, and they're fine to be released by the board.
And we have, of course, pictures of how the corrections were made, so it was quite detailed, the report. Does anybody have any questions on this?
No.
Okay, then I would need a motion to release the covenant.
I'll move to release.
Okay, is there a second?
Second. I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstain. Okay. Cape Club, request for lot release. Now, this gets a little bit more complicated.
Perhaps I could shorten this.
We don't normally take comments, Mike.
Oh, yeah, but this one needs to have a discussion.
I'm not so sure.
Well, the town engineer and us are far apart, and I had to make a compromise.
Tom?
Yes, ma'am. We have had a number of conversations and a number of reviews, inspections on Cape Estates subdivision. Previously, the board had voted to release the 5 model homes based on the original $212,000 bond. I'm shorthanding the numbers there. The applicant has been moving forward with preparing a bond for all the lots, and indicated that the applicant would prefer to move forward with all the lots released for just one bond. So instead of 5 model homes for $212,000, we're moving forward with a bond amount for all of the lots. That bond amount is presently $480,000, and let me read the numbers for you, because those numbers are the product of a lot of hard work to get to that point. Thank you. $480,324, which includes a 15% contingency. We had a couple different bond amounts considered. We had some documentation to back up some of the costs that had been provided by the development team. At my request, I asked Falmouth Engineering to take the inspections they had previously done, identify those areas that weren't completed, and put together a bond amount based upon numbers that we could verify, and those numbers were based on some of the information Mass Highway has for their bid list. So Falmouth Engineering Division went out, did the inspections, put together the draft punch list, which we shared with the applicant, and then put together the bond amount for $480,000. $324. The board has the ability to create a lesser amount. if they so wish. With that in mind, I looked at ways where we might be able to reduce the bond a bit, but still have some assurance for the town. So if one of the bond conditions, one of the bond amounts is in there, is for replacing the base and the binder course that was put down prior to any inspections. So there's a number in there for that, and if the board wanted to because of the difference between what they had suggested and what the actual bond amount was so large, Kelly Cardoza-Durfee, who I've been speaking with on a pretty regular basis, she's on a well-deserved holiday right now, which is why she's not here. I said, well, the board could give them half credit for some of that work that they may have to tear out, being that $120,000 amount for the paving, base course paving, and the gravel underneath of it. So with that, you could conceivably reduce the bond amount by $62,703 to get us to a bond amount of $418,000. There's been a lot of conversation, a lot of discussions, a lot of emails back and forth about this. In fact, as of this afternoon, you've got a recent email from, a letter from our Falmouth Engineering Division explaining why their bond is what their bond is. But it's our recommendation of the town planner and the engineering division to request a bond of $480,000, $324. But if the the board, like I said, can create any amount they want. But in the efforts of of sort of trying to ease some of the burden of what the applicant has to do, you could make that bond amount anything you wanted, including the $418,695 amount I had recommended. The difference between, and in Massachusetts, we don't get to decide what the bond is. The applicant can give us a cash bond or a surety account or a tripartite agreement. And so knowing that this is a bond and they're not actually taking $418,000 out of their pocket, but they are in fact buying a bond for that, I don't know what the premium is, but I would venture to say that the cost is incremental in the difference between the two. And I'll leave it at that. We've got a recommended bond amount of $483.24 to make sure all the work is completed. Because in the end of the day, if we have to do that work, we have to pay a prevailing wage, and we have to go out and do that work to secure a contractor to do that sort of work. So our numbers and Mass Highway's numbers tend to be higher than what you would see on the private market because we have to pay that prevailing wage.
And you will see in your packet a letter that just came in today from Mr. McGrath with, it says revised August 13, in which he gives, let's see, it looks like it's page 3, a breakdown of what he believes to be a good number, which is the $227,000 and change for the performance bond that he believes is a suitable amount. Have you had a chance to look at that at all while we've been sitting here talking? Okay. And then this is from Jim McLaughlin as to why the town is recommending the $480,000, and he gives a lot of information as to what wasn't done properly when they went out and inspected it. It says, in the current instance, we have prepared an estimate that is all-inclusive of the board's requirements and is a conservative but realistic estimate of costs that could be incurred should the town be required to complete the project. Because the applicant has the ability to choose the type of security to ensure completion, there is no assurance that a bonding company would be the entity to complete the work. And our perspective, the engineering department's perspective, must be the worst-case scenario to complete all work in the subdivision. That is not a punch list, but an estimate of what may be required if the current work shows signs of failure in the future. Therefore, the estimate provided to the board is a reasonable, conservative estimate. Naturally, it is within the discretion of the board to set any amount it deems appropriate. Now, having all this in front of it, I'd like to get discussion of the board going here as to what you think is appropriate And remember, tonight we are looking at releasing all of the lots with this bond, where we just said, okay, if the language could be put together that was acceptable, we would release the 5 lots for the demo houses. So, who wants to,
Madam Chairman, could I please speak? Because I
No.
think we might be able to short circuit all
not
this.
yet, Mike. I believe you sent your letter, that should be self-explanatory, and I think if the board has any questions, they can ask them of you. Paul?
We spent a lot of time on this, and I've worked in construction, so I know the reasons why the work was done. This is not a standalone project, this is part of a much bigger program. So it's not like a developer coming in who's not gonna be around and potentially have to fill in. This is a project that's existing, that's going to be here for a long time. The intent of this bond is not to be punitive, rather to cover the town if they have to do the work. I think the likelihood of the town having to do that work is pretty slim. So I'd be in favor of reducing the bond amount from the 480 to something less, with all due respect to the engineering department.
And that would be what Tom has indicated, that would be a reasonable reduction as to the 418,695, not to the 227 that Mr. McGrath
We
is
can talk
indicating.
about that.
Pardon?
We can talk about that.
Yes, certainly, that, you started the discussion off. Who else would like to? John, do you have anything to say on
I
this?
do have something to say, and I want to preface it with, I feel that this applicant has done a wonderful job at that development, the golf course, and he's spent a lot of time and a lot of money to get to where we are tonight, including giving contributions for open space, for affordable housing, gone to the Cape Cod Commission, probably spent around $1 million to the town of Falmouth. And he gets a subdivision, puts a road in, and the road's not acceptable to the engineering department. And I'm really at a quandary what to do here, because I have empathy for the developer, but I also have a responsibility to the town of Falmouth. And when you read what Mr. McLaughlin sent to us today, it says here that the applicant was notified not to do the paving without an inspection. And then the paving was done, the base coat. It says here, June 21st, engineering personnel witnessed 4 compaction tests. All of the tests failed to meet the standards of section 305-35C. On June 24th, engineering personnel witnessed 14 compaction tests. 12 of the 14 tests failed to meet the standards outlined in the section. That talks about some of the varying depths of the pavement. And I've gone through our subdivision regulations, and they don't talk about not having inspected up to that point. So they must have done the inspections for the drainage, for the original excavation of the road, to make sure that the soil underneath the gravel is proper to receive the gravel, the dense grade. And they must have witnessed the dense grade, but not the paving. So I really have a lot of empathy, but I do not, and I expressed this to the town planner this afternoon, I do not see any sense in having a bond here at all. The reason for that is that if this road is not acceptable today to the engineering department, how's it gonna be acceptable when they're done with all the construction and they get ready to put the top coat on? And what happens if they, and I don't think this will happen, but what happens if they build out all the houses there and don't put a top coat on? There's nothing in our regulations that say it has to be done 60 days after the last occupancy permit. There's nothing that says they have to do a top coat, except they're gonna put up a bond. And that puts the bonding company on the hook. And I really feel at this point, it should just stop, and they need to correct what's there. If they have to strip the binder coat off, if it's that bad and it's not acceptable to the engineering department, stop right now, correct it, and then get an acceptance by the engineering department, and then the bond for the rest of the work would be minor compared to what we're talking about today. I don't see any reason to push this problem 2 years down the road or 3 years down the road. And I really have empathy for this developer. I'm a developer, and I understand the pain and the suffering and the time and the money he spent into this. And he's got he's got something that's not acceptable to the engineering department. It's ridiculous.
Can I address the board at all?
So
Let's
that's,
have a discussion first, then you might have something more to contribute to it, once we get
So-
the discussion going.
I think there should be no bond accepted. There should be no release of lots. This road should be corrected. Come back in here.
You mean even the lots, John, I want to clarify this, that we already voted on for the demo houses? the
I don't
demo-
mind, we did 5 lots for a
Yes,
model
we
home.
did.
If he wants to build those at his risk, I have no problem with that.
With
and
the
I think-
bond that we said would be okay.
But I think the road needs to be corrected
Okay.
before they go any further beyond the 5 model homes.
And Bob?
I don't have much to add to what John said, other than my initial thought was that this road has to be fixed before we do go any further with it. I believe that.
Even before John was thinking this.
Yeah,
and it-
yeah. After reading all this, I said this road's a mess. It just needs to be ripped up and redone.
Charlotte?
I'm not a developer, I'm not an engineer, and I would like to hear what Mr. McGrath has to say about it in response to what he's heard so far.
But he hasn't heard everybody so far. That was my point. I want to hear, Jim, do you have anything?
I agree with John. Can't believe that there's so many things that the engineers have failed, and they went ahead and did this at their own risk, so.
And they
I mean,
knew that, and
We were
Mr.
there
McGrath
just
said that.
before they paved it. We saw that they were doing this to beat a weather situation, or whether, so that's what they said, so. I was not aware that the engineers found so many faults with it. How can you fix it? Do they have a proposed fix for have we heard anything about that? We haven't. They just want to reduce the money, so.
Tom?
Yeah, and this is part of the conversation Mr. Drew and I had this afternoon, is that I believe that it's a lot easier to fix things if you have revenue coming in. From my perspective, if we have a bond in place that covers the deficiencies of the road, and we release the lots, that allows the developer to use this roadway as it is to make access to these lots, to build homes and to sell homes, to put money into the coffers to fix the bond. Because money doesn't grow on trees. You can go to banks and get them and things like that. But if you're able to generate the income you need to fix the deficiencies of your development, and the town has some leverage in the form of a bond, then I think that is the best route going forward at this point. Allow the developer their lot releases with the bond amount, allow them to build houses, allow them to get some revenue coming back into the pot, which makes it a lot easier for them to fix the deficiencies of the road.
Tom, I have a question because I don't understand precisely when bonds have to be released, because this road could fail in the future, as we've seen roads do that weren't properly constructed, say 5 years, and then, or later, and then the road's fallen apart and the homeowners have no recourse. How long can the town hold on to that bond? How is it written? I haven't seen it, so how is it written to give the town some surety?
In the original form of the bond, the bond was a 3-year bond, and we asked for language in the bond release that said 90 days prior to that 3 years expiration, if the work wasn't done, the town could write and say, we have had a failure to comply, and we're calling the bond at our discretion, as the sole arbiter. Since that time, town council, working with their bond council, brought another bond back, which is essentially puts that bond in place so it doesn't have an expiration date. So how do we get to that point, and how do we release those things? There are provisions in our in our subdivision regulations to allow releases of the bond as we move along.
So partial release,
There are partial
stepwise.
releases that are available. I don't recommend necessarily nickel and diming a bond, because oftentimes as prices escalate, you get to a point where you may have a fairly diminished bond and not enough work to sort of inspire the applicant to complete the work that's done. Now, keep in mind, if we're holding $480,000 of their money, that's real motivation, but we don't get to make that call. The Commonwealth doesn't let us do that. You have to have some manner of bond, one of these three, and this is one of them. And while it will fall to the bond company to pay that money out, whether they do the work or we just call the bond and hire our own contractors, I'm comfortable that we have a sufficient bond amount and a mechanism in place under the law to provide that security, that surety as is required in order to allow the developer to proceed. But frankly, just telling them, from my perspective, and I don't build things, I'm not a developer, but the thought of we've spent this money on putting the road in, and now we're gonna have to go back and get that money from somewhere else, I think releasing the lots with the surety in place to allow them to fund some of those repairs is, frankly, one of our better courses of action at this point.
And you would be comfortable of coming down on the 418 and change figure?
That was an arbitrary number that I came up with, but it showed that, we're not tone deaf to their concerns.
Jim, I see you crunching numbers.
Yeah,
over
I'm just
there.
wondering I'm figuring how much per house we're doing this. How many houses is it 30?
22.
28.
28? So it's $14,000 or $15,000 a house. That's what I was thinking of. I could build that in.
Just out of the blue, you were thinking of that as being a reasonable number for a
Well, I was
bond.
just trying to decide, there's a lot of houses here, you know what I mean? And I kind of was all set with doing the 5. I'm really not all set with doing the whole thing. But I think I'd like to hear how they're gonna fix them now. I like John's approach.
Can I address Mr. Bott's response?
Yes, please.
So, again, I have all the empathy in the world for this applicant in front of us, more than probably anybody in this room. And allowing them to have cash flow to fix the road, I feel that the applicant didn't pave the road. He hired a contractor. The contractor obviously, according to the town engineer, did not do this adequately. Either it's the dense grade, or it's the asphalt, or both in this report. And I don't think it would be any money out of this applicant's pocket to fix this road, because he did not do the work here. He hired somebody. And the company that did the work has the equipment to strip this road in a day or 2 or 3 and get it inspected and repave it. This could be done in 2 weeks easily. And then the town has a road that's inspected, approved by the engineering department, build 28 houses, put the top coat on at the end, have a much smaller bond in place, like we would with any other applicant. To me, it kind of reminds me of, we have a federal deficit of like $22 trillion, right? Who's gonna pay it off? When does it get paid off? Never? I mean, why do we wanna take a road that is not acceptable and say, well, in 2 or 3 years when they're all done, then they'll fix it and pave it and whatever? How are they gonna fix it then? Why not? I just don't understand that. To me, if we're gonna do a bond, the bond should be less than what they're talking about. It's punitive at that amount. At 400 some odd thousand is very punitive. But to me, this problem should be corrected now.
Okay, now we will go to the applicant. You've heard all of our comments.
I have, and I need to try to get your understanding. First of all, there are in front of you is a test that was done by an independent lab on July 3rd, okay? And in the test, the orange spots, 1 there and 2 up there, failed by a small margin. The rest of the road all passed completely. This is a binder coat. The road is not junk. The road will be fine. And as the developer, on this property, which I'm sure most of you have gone to, I spent millions of dollars on improving the property, millions of dollars. I've contributed, as you know, to the town of approximately $1 million to Barnstable and to other members as far as the Cape Cod Commission. The bond that should be here should be approximately $100,000 at maximum, which would be the top coat to take care of finishing the road and the monuments, which our engineer, who's done business in this town for over 30 years, knows how to do monuments, and he's quoted what it is. So the amount of $213,000 or whatever we had, that is the cost for the contractor to remove the whole road, which doesn't need to be removed, binder it again, and top coat it, and do the monuments. So it's being taken out of context. One of my associates who works for me, his name's Dan Boone, has been involved in the paving business. He has paved thousands, miles and miles, mainly did state work for a major corporation. He was involved, he came down on July 3rd with the testing lab, did all of these tests, and we're not running away. Like, this is a major project for me to do, what I'm doing with this whole property. There's 100+ acres that I'm doing. And I just feel it's not being put in proper context. When you read a document that says that the road is all bad and it all needs to be removed, that is not true. This is a certified engineer. He's not a fly-by-night engineer. The town has probably used him before. The contractor who put the pavement in is Lynch Pavement. Excuse me? Lawrence Lynch, which the town has used for many years, okay? And this is good work. It's not bad work. There's a specific area at the end of that cul-de-sac that needs to be cut out and repaired, and 2 other places need to be cut out and repaired. And Lawrence Lynch Company is happy to come in, cut out, repair that. It's a finite, simple thing. It can be done tomorrow. But in practical terms, it doesn't make sense to do it tomorrow. Because as we go and work on building the homes and put heavy equipment on it, any damage that happens to the binder, we need to fix, we need to make it proper, and then we top coat it when it's appropriate to do. The dense grade that has been installed, all the utilities and everything there was completely inspected by the engineers. And it was my call and my engineer the day before the storm to put the asphalt down so that we would not destroy what we had. And it's a judgment call, and it was not done to be inappropriate to the town. That's the last thing I want to do. But unfortunately, there were storms coming in, and you've been, I'm sure, in situations, you're caught between a rock and a hard place, and you need to try to protect and do the right thing. We did the right thing. And any damage that's there, I'm gonna stand behind and fix. I'm not walking away from it.
If I could address the board as far as the reason behind.
Please come up and state your name.
My name is Daniel D. Boone. I work for David Spiegel, CMI Property Management. And I have 30 years plus background in paving and production of paving materials and highway construction materials. Third-party testing indicated that the moisture content in the materials, the gravel materials, was higher than optimum. Therefore, initial testing was very difficult to do, but the July 3rd testing indicated that, as David mentioned, that there's only 3 areas of concern now. Now, the reason to revisit this later on in the project would be that during the construction activities, we will be torturing the road, so to speak, with heavy equipment We'll be cutting some trenches through it, replacing the binder course where the trenches are cut, and doing repair work as we go. And prior to finished pavement, all of these deficiencies that you're indicating might be there now will be rechecked, eliminated if they do exist, and prior to finished pavement. And as a developer, that's only common sense for us to do. But to spend the money now, up front, and do all this work, and then torture the road, cut trenches, and casting adjustments and such, everything, all that type of work, it will be paying 3 times over to do it. The gravel, test results for the gravel products that came from Lawrence Lynch were exceptionally good. So to say that the gravel needs to be replaced is not accurate. Third-party testing indicated that just the moisture content was too high. By covering the roadway, allowing the product to dry, the testing done on July 3rd substantially improved. And we feel that, given the test of time, that if there are any defects in the roadway, they're gonna certainly come to light, and that later on, that we'll be able to test it again and find that the roadway will be fine, and that our end product will definitely be acceptable into specification.
Cheryl?
I would like to speak. When there was an impending storm that was gonna be hitting in 2 days, so I went out and I inspected the gravel and I followed the customary procedure that had been in place for many years. The only trouble is the procedure that was being used is not the procedure that's in the subdivision regulation. So I went out and I did the inspections that were taught to me by Nate Ellis and John Hendrickson, where I went out and I dug where there were changes from cut to fill. I verified over and over again it was more than 12 inches of good gravel. So we went ahead and paved the road. I notified the town we were gonna put down binder. Binder is only the first 2 inches. What's happened, as been happening over the last 40 years, is you put the binder down and then you drive construction equipment. And if there's any flaws in the pavement, it'll show up, because we're gonna be driving concrete trucks, excavators, dump trucks, and heavy vehicles. It's just that I forgot to read the regulations, because I did it the same way we've been doing it for years. So the point here is that, again, it's binder course. We're not building furniture. Now, when I did witness that there was a soft spot, and the soft spot was at the end of the cul-de-sac, right in here. There was another soft spot over in here. That is, after they put the binder down, you could feel that the binder was soft. But if I can bring you there today, I can show you that it's now hard. What's happened is the aggregate is basically, it's coarse, meaning that there's a lot of voids in it. It's designed to drain, and it has drained in the meantime. So you can walk all the way around that cul-de-sac, it's in great shape. There was another soft spot over by one of these areas, of course you can't see where my thumb is, right in here. And you can't find that now, it's drained. So the bottom line is, time is on our side, because the saturated gravel, it was raining when they put the binder down. And so the bottom line is that this binder does not need to be replaced, neither does the gravel need to be replaced. So I would like to talk, let's agree that I don't agree about those numbers. The other thing I don't agree about is they have said that there's $100,000 worth of monuments based on Mass Highway prices. I'd like to pass out a typical Mass Highway monument. these are too thick. You want, you get enough?
Okay.
No, I can get this.
Madam Chairman,
Yes?
just while we're passing things out here, would it be possible to, since we're hearing testimony that the street's now healed and got better, should we have our engineers go out and look at it again?
Well, wait,
I'm just asking a question.
can we, let me finish. I have something to talk about, and it would be better for me to finish. The town engineers use MHB numbers for setting monuments. They're $455 a monument. The reason I gave you this diagram, this is a state monument. It's 6 foot deep. It's 6 by 6. It's stone. It sticks up out of the ground. Well, we don't do monuments like that, and in fact, we've never done it. Our monuments are 30 inches, 4 by 4. So this thing weighs almost, this you need a piece of equipment to set. So I would ask you to disregard the town's cost estimate for the monuments, because it's wrong. The other thing I passed out was a photograph of a survey monument. It's, what it is, it's aluminum bar, and at the top, there is a cap. I have been setting these since over 20 years, and the town has accepted these as lot corners. Unfortunately, your subdivision regulations talk about concrete bounds. But I have been setting these, and the town has found these to be suitable all over Falmouth, including most of Ballymead, Falmouth Thea Park, several other places. I've been putting these in for years. They're are suitable substitute, and they cost a lot less. So what I would ask you to focus on is that is, there's no reason for us to stop and change, and I think Mashpee's another town that allows this. So your regulations talk about concrete monuments. In my letter, I said, you're also gonna be careful, because if we hit a boulder, we can't put a concrete monument in, and we also don't put concrete monuments in walls. Yeah, again, July 3rd, we did these tests, and what I talked about was what we'd like to do is have the planning board accept the performance bond that was around $230,000 and release lots 1 through 14 from the road covenant, leaving under the covenant 15, 16 through 28. And what that does is the value left on those lots is more than to make up for whatever cost might be. And since our costs are based on the flaws that we saw, and we don't believe for one iota that you're gonna have to remove and dispose of the existing gravel, nor remove and dispose of the binder. Yes, I did something wrong in that. I didn't read the regulations. I was so used with the way we did before. The way we did before is I would inspect it, call a town engineer, they'd go out and confirm it. Now, apparently, it's different. The reason I said go forward was I had seen what happened to the gravel if it rained on. Rills would form, the gravel would get saturated, you couldn't pave on it, and it would cause erosion into the drainage. So the other thing you have to remember, until you put the binder on, you keep the catch basins covered. So the drainage systems don't work. As soon as we put the binder on, you take the covers off and the drainage systems work. So I look at it in the long run, is that my decision to go ahead and pave was best for the project and best for the environment. I realized that, I didn't follow the procedure. You can't fight City Hall. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I'm sorry to these gentlemen that my mistake has caused all this disruption. But I hope that you will accept that for the sum of $230,000 bond, you release lots 1 through 14, and 15 through 28 will stay under covenant. In the meantime, we'll go do a new retest. And if the new retest passes, then we'll come back. Or not if, when it passes, it'll come back. And it will pass, because I tell you what, when I see those two soft spots, and you can now even find them, this gravel is good gravel, it's good pavement, and I believe the next round will pass. Now, the town engineer says he didn't witness these tests, so he can witness the next ones. Is there any questions?
Charlotte?
I'd like to ask Tom a question. At the time that you were preparing the amount that you wanted to put on the bond, you and the engineers were working together, and you came up, there was no question at that time that you wanted people to start the road over, even though you knew what the engineers thought of it. So I'm a little startled that we're now going backwards to starting the road over, and would like the conversation to get back to how much of a bond, because that's where we started and where you and the engineers got to. Is that correct?
No, no one said you should build the road over.
Right, or start over.
Correct.
So that,
That was, so
even though
what our
you
engineers
could have
said,
thought of that.
yeah, what our engineers said, there are deficiencies in the road, and this bond amount will ensure that those deficiencies are fixed by the end of the day. And as folks have pointed out, when you've got a road and there's construction traffic on it, it's gonna take whatever it's gonna take, so you're gonna have to dress up some things anyhow. But no one has suggested that they rip out the road, no one, staff-wise, has suggested they rip out the road.
But you could have suggested that.
That's in his request, his estimate for the cost is to remove and dispose of the gravel and the binder. So I say that's a finding that we have to remove both.
So, as our engineers point out, they believe their estimate is a conservative estimate that protects the town based on the inspections they've done and costs that they can verify, based on Mass Highway's cost, which is essentially what our costs are gonna be, because we're gonna have to pay prevailing wage to get these things done. That's the bet that we make, that hopefully we won't have to do it, but if we do have to do that, then we'll have to do, you know, and for certain dollar amounts, you have to go through procurement and all those sort of things as well. So there's a fair amount to having to replace a road, or having to complete a subdivision depending upon where you're at. To Mr. Drewley's point, if we've got a small bond where essentially everything was put into spec, everything's fine in the subbase, and all you've got to do is come in and put in a finishing course and some street lights and things like that, then the bond's typically smaller and makes it a lot easier to deal with. But where we're at right now, out of an abundance of caution from the engineering department, their engineers are conservative. They've looked at what they can determine on the ground and applied a price to it and said, here's what our estimation of the bond should be. And they pointed out, and everybody's pointed out, that the board has the ability to make that bond less than what it might be.
Well, Pat pointed out that it was, because we would be releasing all of the lots, it puts an extra weight on getting this right this time. But now we're hearing there's a possibility of not releasing all of the lots, that there'd be an interim time to be able to check on it, so we'd have an extra way to hold them to putting in a really good road. We could give them the lower bond, go for the lots 1 to 14 release, and they could move forward. Because as you said, that gives them the leeway with the money to finish it properly.
Yeah, I think that you should allow I think you should allow them to recoup some of the expense they've got by selling lots. Whether it's 1 through 14 or all of them, just make sure you've got a sufficient bond in place. I would not be, if I was voting and I don't vote, I would not be voting to no lots for you, rip it all out, put it back in, and then come back and see us. That to me seems unusual. I've never run across something like that.
Well, the part that would feel unusual to me would be the board, or at least I, not supporting the town engineers and what they're thinking. We normally do support what the town engineers are thinking. The town engineers would have been able to say, no, better to stop, get it right the first time. They had that option available to them, but it's not the one that they chose. They chose instead to have a bigger bond than usual so that we would be able to repair something later. So they didn't think it was that big a risk that you had to start all over. So I would be more comfortable if we could do that. If we could say, fine, we'd release up lots 1 through 14, would lower the bond amount to whatever seemed comfortable, something maybe between the number proposed by the applicant and this 418, because now we're at less risk, and let them move forward. We've held this up quite a while.
Okay, I haven't really said much, and I've been listening to everything that has been said. And the thing that occurs to me is what Tom said, that if we went for the, say, the 418,000 for the bond and released all the lots, and our town engineers went out there and said, okay, we agree with Mr. McGrath that the roadway is now stable, we don't have to worry about it, and you obviously don't want to put the finish coat on because things do happen during
Right.
construction. I think it would be easier to release all of the lots, because when they are trying to sell the lots, somebody might not want 1 through 14, they may want the ones across the road. So it would be easier and better to release all of the lots, go for the 416, 418, and then release it, since we have that capacity to do so, incrementally. If our engineers decide that the roadway is now stable, that the problem that they are indicating has gone away, then that would release so many more dollars from that bond that we're holding at that point, and not waiting until the end of the bond, which can go to infinity, Tom said. So, to me, that makes sense.
I prefer what Charlotte's talking about, that
Yeah.
release 1 through 14, that's what the applicant is asking for, and don't release the other 14 lots unless the town engineer signs off on the road,
Yeah,
the base coat, the way it is. They're saying that it's gonna dry out, it'll pass the compaction test, they've given us some reports where it has, that after the test that the town witnessed in June. So if they're comfortable with that, the town holds hostage half of their subdivision and release lots 15 through 18, keep the bond in place that they've offered to the end, and but do not release those extra 14 lots unless the town engineer signs off.
That's okay by me, too. I was just
I would-
proposing an alternative.
I would prefer
Yeah.
that.
What do you think would be the bond amount that would be fair, though, John?
Well, I don't even think the 400,000, that's outrageous.
Well, Mike suggested an amount.
Yeah,
He suggested 230.
I would have no problem with that.
Yeah.
If the
Okay.
town signs off, there's not much work left after the base coat and the town signs off on it.
Jim?
I don't really care about the estimates of what kind of monuments you use. I care about the road. What I'm hearing is that our engineers tested it, and there was a big failure number, significant. And now all of a sudden, a different engineers tested it, and it isn't. So what changed? And do our engineers agree that just giving time and this thing dries out and becomes better? That's really what I think we should be talking about, you know, why do we have two different, huge difference in the testing? And if it's time, and if that's a logical answer, why not have our engineers go out and test again and see if they agree, and we're done.
That's okay, too.
I mean, I'm worried, I really don't care about the estimates, it's gotta be made right one way or the other, and I really wanna understand how this road got better without anything being done to it, and have that explained to me, because I think I hear it dried out. Is that
That's what I'm hearing.
saying? Yeah, I'd like to hear an answer, yeah.
I believe that all the testing has been done by us. The one through 4.
I understand.
Independent,
Your
yeah.
AT,
yeah.
whatever it is, yeah.
ATC, yeah, independent lab, third party. The first day that I think was witnessed, I wasn't down here, but I understand when it was test 1 through 4, and they were having trouble getting compaction. It was after a rainstorm, and it was wet gravel going in, which is typically a problem during the spring. Material producers have trouble providing dry gravel, and when I say dry, at optimum moisture, and that material was 7% moisture. It was delivered at elevated moisture. It got rained on again. Unfortunately, when the first tests were being done, it was done at 12 to 14% moisture. Definitely too high for that material. But yes, the material did dry out. It started coming back towards optimum moisture, and just that alone, you'll start coming into more acceptable test results. And that's where we're at right now.
So you're saying that our engineers tested it when it was wet, and your engineers tested it when it was dry?
No, we provided all the testing through third party. I do not believe that your engineering department actually performed any testing.
So the same engineer that did the second, is the same one that did the first?
Same firm, did all the testing, third party, accredited laboratory, did the,
So it is getting better on its own.
It is.
yeah, and if you look at the
That's
test.
what I understand now,
Yeah,
right?
if you look at the test results, we've come from
So it's the same
12 and
test.
14,
Same third party doing the testing,
correct.
and
In the
they're
same
agreeing that it
locations.
just needed to dry out and the problem's gone away?
Right, and putting the binder down
Okay.
prior to more rain and saturating it,
I understand now. You've
Okay.
answered all my questions.
Okay, so, Mr. McGrath, Mike McGrath, and Jim McLaughlin emailed a few times after our recent correspondence, and Jim McLaughlin's 3:57 PM email said, in response to Mike McGrath's report that 11 of those tests passed, he says, those tests were not witnessed, and there is no explanation as to how the density of the material, i.e. pounds per cubic foot, can change. So our engineer was sort of scratching his head about how things change just with time. So it gets back to, we have some work to do in the field. And I think that if the board is comfortable releasing half of those lots for a smaller bond amount, and that allows the developer to move forward and recapitalize the road work to get that fix done, it's the board's call. But that doesn't seem like an awful, does not seem like a bad idea to move forward with at this point.
Do those lots 1 through 14 incorporate the lots at the demonstration houses? Okay, so, I think that might be a solution.
With the caveat that 15 through 28 do not get released without the engineering department accepting
Absolutely,
the binder coat and the dense grade that's there.
absolutely.
And when Mr. McLaughlin was here a month and a half or so ago discussing changes in our bylaw, possible changes, he went through the same procedure that these gentlemen have gone through with the building of a road, that you don't want to put the top coat on until the end because there's damage done to the road, and if there is any deficiency anywhere, it shows and gets corrected, and so he knows that's the procedure also, and he said that, so I'm very comfortable with that. I think that's a
Okay.
great compromise. I don't want to hold these guys up, and
So then we would
For
need a
many reasons.
motion that, to release lots 1 through 14 in this subdivision, we would require a bond in the amount of $230,000. And that therefore, and that none of the other lots shall be released until the binder coat is determined to be suitable by our engineering department. Is that
Yeah.
the motion, John, that you see would be
yes, and the
reasonable?
only thing I would add to that is if they get the engineering department to agree with the road 2 months from now, they can come
Yeah.
back and ask for the rest of the
Yeah.
rest
Sure.
of the lots.
Yeah.
to be released.
Absolutely.
Solve the problem.
Yeah.
They don't have to wait till they build 14 houses to do
Right.
it.
Okay, does somebody want to say so moved?
So moved.
Second.
Second, yeah.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much for your help.
It took a long time, but I think we've gotten to a reasonable solution.
Thank you very much. Where's my- Hey, Tom, where's my, Oh, I don't need it, do I?
No. You send us stuff, you put it on the screen.
All right, we move on now. Public hearing. The applicant is College Light Opera Company Incorporated. Site plan review application to construct a new rehearsal hall and administrative building, as well as the addition of a two-car garage to an existing student housing building at 54 Chappaquay Road. Hoadley Martinez Architects. And for the applicant, please.
Good evening.
Oh, you've got a notice to read. Okay.
Public meeting notice was issued for the College Light Opera Company project on July 26, 2019, and 15 abutters were notified by regular mail.
Thanks, Paul. Now,
Thank you for your patience. Good evening. My name is Jeff Nickerson. I'm an attorney here in town, and I'm counsel to the College Light Opera Company. We're here to discuss the proposed addition of a rehearsal barn to the existing site on Chappaquiddick Road, as well as the proposed addition of a garage to an existing student housing building. So a little bit about the College Light Opera Company. It's a community where young artists have the opportunity to practice and perfect their art in a supportive and nurturing environment. You can tell that the client wrote that because it's much more articulate than I am. It was established in 1969 and it was incorporated in 1972. It is a 501c3 organization. It is a nonprofit. It took title to 54 Chappaquiddick Road in October of 1978. There's actually 3 parcels. Some of it's registered, some of it's unregistered, but in total, that's when they took title. Clock is the largest resident theater company in the U.S., located in Falmouth on Cape Cod. It performs 9 operas and musicals each season, and the shows are actually put on up at Highfield Theater. The shows don't occur at the site. This is a site that's used only for housing and practice, and, you know, to give the kids a place to kind of relax and be in a nice spot in West Falmouth. There's approximately 90 students and staff, and again, productions are at Highfield. The use as dormitory buildings and the proposed use as a new recital space and administrative offices are allowed by right under something that's called the Dover Amendment. It's Chapter 40A, Section 3 of our general laws, and it says, "No zoning ordinance may regulate or restrict the use of land or structures for religious or educational purposes on land owned or leased by a nonprofit educational corporation." So in this case, the nonprofit owns the property, and they have been operating there for years. And this would be the addition of a new space to give the kids somewhere to practice, to have some administrative facility at the site, and to free up some of the existing structures at the site. So again, Clock's use of the property is a by right permitted use, and the construction of this barn is a by right use. We're here for site plan review to identify to you what the site plan will look like, to seek feedback about parking, flow. And the unique thing about this Dover Amendment is that education, when people think of education, they often think about sitting in a classroom. Education under the Dover Amendment is something that's not limited to classroom learning. Education happens in a variety of settings. And in this instance, where the students would be having the opportunity to learn, to work with the instructors, and to rehearse, that falls within the definition of education. And Mr. Palmer, our building commissioner, has recognized that. I have a letter that he signed that I'd like to submit for the record. So education is and will remain the primary and dominant purpose of Clock's use of the property at Chappaquiddick Road. Again, 90 students and staff are there. It's not intended that there's going to be an increase. So while this is a new space, the size of the group is intended to remain the same. So here's our site plan. It's a little bit busy, I apologize for that. But what I can show you is there are 1, 2, 3, 4 smaller dormitory buildings at the property. And what everybody probably recognizes is this, which is the existing main building. So the existing main building is where a couple of different things happen. It's cafeteria, it's where the students practice, and it's also housing. There's also some administrative space in there. The executive director of the company has a spot in there as well. So here, a little bit less busy, is what the proposal is. So this is the new proposed rehearsal barn. It's proposed to be 8,850 square feet. I think there was a typo in something I submitted earlier. I think I said 8805. It's 8850. The existing facilities are served by Title V septic systems, which are going to be replaced by a larger system, which will sit underneath the parking lot. That has been approved by the Board of Health. The site has been before Conservation. Conservation approved it. We have a resource area, Chappaquiddick Harbor's down here. We're trying to be very sensitive to that. Tim from Holmes McGrath was very thoughtful in doing that with Conservation. This is a floor plan of the existing building. It's a little bit tough to see, but we've got a music staff office over here, library, manager's office, director's office, music room, utility room, green room, music library, washroom facilities, another music room, publicist office. The biggest component is the rehearsal space. So the thing to keep in mind about this rehearsal space is that it's just that. It's intended to be a rehearsal space. It's not intended to be a performance space. It's for rehearsal. It's for the students who are there and the staff who are there to work on their craft. You know, the fact is, this property is in West Falmouth, and the production facility is at the top of the hill. And so this will allow the students and the staff to have much easier access to facilities where they can practice in a setting that's appropriate and contemplative of the theater. A couple of elevations. So this is the elevation from the northwest. In terms of the height of the structure, to the top of this roof line on this parapet is 34 feet 5 inches, so it complies with zoning. Under our zoning bylaw, decorative or ornamental cupolas don't count for purposes of calculation of the height. So this is the highest point, and again, it complies with zoning. This is another elevation from the northeast. This is the southeast elevation, and this is the southwest. To give you an idea of what the space looks like on the inside, this is a cross-section. So you can see nothing exciting, utility room, bathroom, corridor. The rehearsal space is the main focus in this building. It is a space that doesn't have a second floor above it. It's a large space. It's something that you would expect that would, you know, acoustically be appropriate for these folks to practice and to learn. So, Falmouth Building Commissioner, as I mentioned, approved the use of this in March of 2019. The Conservation Commission has approved this on July 16, and the Board of Health has approved the new septic plan. In terms of dimensional zoning requirements in an RB district, 20% by right lot coverage by structures, proposed is going to be 9.8%, so we're well below. Lot coverage by structures, parking, and paving, 40% by right, 16.9% proposed, again, well below. Minimum lot area in this district is 40,000 square feet. We have 6.3 acres. Minimum front yard setback is 25 feet. The closest structure to the street is the existing inn, and that's going to remain the closest structure to the street, even after construction of the proposed garage, which is contemplated in the future, and after construction of the rehearsal barn, because that's set further back. Required frontage is 100 feet. We have almost 1,000. Side yard setback, 10 feet. Closest structure to the side yard after construction of the proposed garage, that would be the closest to the side, and that's 27 feet. Closest structure to the backyard, 15 feet. That's an existing dormitory. That's not changing. And it still complies with the 10-foot. It's sited, this rehearsal barn, so that it complies in all respects with existing setback requirements. Square footage, again, 8850. Maximum building height allowed is 2.5 stories, not to exceed 35 feet. We comply with that. Building commissioner has determined that each structure on the property is considered a principal structure because of the Dover Amendment use. Again, 34.5 is the maximum height of the proposed rehearsal barn. Again, cupola is not being considered. There are 34 parking spaces required based on ITE parking estimates. In this case, there are 43 parking spaces overall. 2 of those are accessible spaces. 2 are required to be accessible, and 2 are accessible. And that is an overview of what the proposal is. Be happy to try to answer any questions the board might have.
Okay. Can you go back one slide, please?
Sure.
I'm looking at the cupola as being considered ornamental, okay. Because this shows here 44 feet high.
To the top of the highest cupola, yes.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Comments, Charlotte?
Oh, I have some questions.
Sure.
Yeah, they're actually, they don't, bear on whether or not you get an approval. Just out of curiosity, what color is the new rehearsal barn going to be? What material's on the exterior?
I'm not certain. I expect it to be in keeping with the current
Does
structure.
anyone know? The existing building is sort of a cream color and dark brown Tudor. I would imagine an effort would be made to make it go with it.
I don't
Or
think
change
there's
it.
any intent to do anything out of the ordinary, but I can certainly get that information, details on the materials.
John?
Just curious, on the back of the building, where it says proposed turnaround, it says proposed rinse station.
Okay?
What exactly is that, please?
My expectation is that it's probably an outdoor shower. There's lots of outdoor showers there presently.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I don't think we're allowed to have outdoor showers anymore because it's gray water, so they call them rinse stations. It's just a chain, you see it on every, it's just a terminology thing, so you don't call it a shower.
Bob,
Because it would create gray water and therefore violate Title V. A rinse station doesn't do that, and that's what that is.
All right, thank you.
There's a gravel driveway that leads into a proposed gravel driveway that goes behind the barn, and this would be on the northwest side of the property. Is that what the fire department is saying should be widened to 18 feet?
Yes.
Okay. And I noticed that there's a coastal bank there, so does this drawing show that? Is that 18 feet on this drawing?
I don't believe so. I mean, we're going to have to comply with conservation certainly and with
Yeah.
any engineering requirements.
Okay, so that isn't 18 feet now, so that would be wider in the,
It may need to be wider, but we'd certainly
Okay.
comply in all respects.
okay.
and if it has to be widened, is that still okay with Concom? Since
We
you
can
have-
certainly take it up with staff.
Yeah.
If we need to, we can.
Yeah, I can
address it.
see how they could do it.
Sure.
Wouldn't be, they could still keep it as it is along the
Yeah.
coastal bank, so,
But I just didn't know whether they'd have to go back to Concom for the widening. They may.
yeah.
Anybody else? Remember, we're looking at this from site plan review, and it's access, it's landscaping, it's lighting.
Well, he hasn't spoken yet to the landscape.
I know.
Right, were you planning to?
I hadn't specifically because this is under conservation jurisdiction, and so everything that we do is going to have to comply with what conservation is. In terms of lighting, all the lighting is intended to be down lighting so that it's not spilling over into other properties. There isn't going to be, the cupolas, I know, are of interest. It's not going to be like a lighthouse. I mean, it will just be a window up there. There's not intended to be lights that are going to be up there shining out.
There are additional requirements beyond conservation, the landscaping requirements of the bylaws. Have you had a chance to take a look at those?
Bear with me for 1 second. I've got some plans here.
This is showing some. Yeah,
So this is the existing condition of the landscaping. And bear with me. You can see we have a lot of zones that we have to respect. We got
yeah.
a lot of zones that we gotta be careful of. This is the proposed. There's gonna be some mitigation planting in this area. There's gonna be a little bit, looks like edge of existing lawn. There might be some mitigation over here, proposed tree protection. Proposed restoration plantings are gonna be in this area. Restoration plantings again over here. The pond is certainly a limiting factor as it relates to the site. So, the engineering team has been thoughtful in working with conservation to make sure that we're gonna plant what they would like to have planted out there, based on the conservation limitations.
We also require lighting in the parking areas for safety.
I don't believe it shows the lights, but certainly we could put whatever lighting would be appropriate. The existing parking area here is gonna come out to make way for the septic system. and then it will have to be repaired. So when the work is done, certainly appropriate lighting will be installed.
It's usually shown on the plans, though, what you propose to put in as lighting.
Yep.
Paul?
Nickerson, could you briefly describe the septic system proposed?
I'm not even gonna try that. That's,
Good evening. For the record, Tim Santos from Holmes and McGrath. I'm actually going to go back to this one. So, this is a bad copy. I'm going to go back to the other one, sorry. So currently, right now, student housing 1 and 2 is served by a Title V septic system, which would be abandoned. Student housing 3 is served by a Title V system that would be abandoned. The inn serviced by 2 cesspools, and student housing number 4 is serviced by a cesspool. So the idea is that we're gonna collect all of the wastewater from each student housing 1, 2, 3, and 4, the inn, as well as the rehearsal barn, through a series of tanks, through a series of pipes and manholes, and it'll be collected down to this initial tank here. That's a settling tank, like a traditional Title V septic tank. From there, it's gonna go through a series of aerobic tanks and anoxic tanks. It's called the sand tow system. It's a system that is currently up at the Mass Tech testing facility up at the Otis base. It has great test results. We have gone to the Board of Health. The Board of Health has reviewed it. Once it goes through this series of tanks, which will nitrify and denitrify, it'll be pressure dosed all the way up to the northeast corner of the property through a series of leaching trenches that'll be pressure dosed. It's as far away from all resource areas as possible to satisfy both the Board of Health and Title V. So if you have any specific questions about it, I'll try to address them as best I can.
You okay with that, Paul?
What's being abandoned up there, the old system?
Yeah, I can go back to here, it'll be easier for me to show you. So, this is student housing 3, there's a tank and a leaching field right here. That'll be abandoned. Student housing 1 and 2, there's a series of tanks and a leaching field here, that'll be abandoned. The inn is serviced by these 2 cesspools right here. Those will be pump dry and abandoned. And then the student housing number 4 is serviced by these 2 cesspools. They'll all be abandoned. All the flow from the new building as well as the existing buildings will be tied into the denitrifying septic system.
Thank you.
Jim?
What's the height of the inn?
The existing elevation of the inn? Says threshold at 14.54.
Excuse me?
Threshold at 14.54. There's some steps you go up to get to the first.
I'm talking building height, the top. I'm trying to see how this 40-foot tower behind it compares to the primary structure, or this is maybe the new primary structure. Actually, there's no more primary structures here because it's the Dover Amendment, right? So you can have as many of them as you want.
Correct. I don't have an elevation by comparison to the existing from the street, but we can certainly propose something if you'd like to see what it would look like.
The main building's 14.6.
Any other questions or comments?
Just the new structure is set back at an angle, but it's set back quite a distance behind the road, so that it will appear shorter. You're not really going to see it much at all, which is too bad. It was a good-looking building. But I can't tell where all the landscaping is going to go up by Chapcoit Road.
Sure, I can get you a detail on the landscape plan, certainly.
Yeah. And you're replacing landscaping where the septic system is going in close to the road and would disturb all that land. The statement was made that you're replacing that landscaping?
There is a landscape architect, excuse me, that's involved with the project, Kim Mercurio Architects, Landscape Architects. There is a landscape design plan for the entire site that was submitted to conservation. We can get that and submit that to you as well. But as far as, let me try to get back here. Up near the road, there will be some vegetation removed for the installation of the leaching fields. And they will be planting grasses over it, like beach-type grasses, because you can't plant any type of shrubbery or trees over the septic system, because they'll go down into the stone and piping, and it'll fail prematurely. But there will be some grasses replanted over in this area, and that's shown on the landscape plan.
We do have a
I was
landscape.
gonna say, I believe a landscape plan had been
Here.
submitted.
We do, but it doesn't show. Oh, here it is.
So what we still need, as far as I know, is the lighting plan.
Sure.
I
And
just
Jim?
have a question. When did these plans become available to us? They weren't available today when I went to the town. This is something that just came in a few hours ago?
I don't think so.
I believe the elevations were the ones that only came in. We had updated elevations based on some conversations the architects had with the building department. And so everything was submitted.
What time did I come by? 2:30? You didn't have them then?
We've had the site plans, but we didn't have the elevations
Elevations.
for
Have
the
the
building.
elevation, still
Because
don't.
when we talked about how the elevations for the building were a little tough to read, and we reached out to the folks at College Site Opera, they said, well, we sent you the wrong building plans, as I understand. And we don't want another incident with the wrong building plans. So they submitted the new elevations that I haven't seen.
So is there anything that I'm missing here, other than the lighting, that people want to see in regard to site plan?
What about
I just wanted to finish Jeff's statement regarding the Dover Amendment, because most people stop at religious nonprofit. The sentence ends with, however, that such land and structures may be subject to reasonable regulations, considering the bulk and height of structures and determining yard size, lot area, setbacks, open space, parking, and building coverage requirements. So the Dover Amendment allows them to use the use, but they are still subject to these reasonable regulations, but not your full-on zoning. So where we typically would have more say, and this is sort of a question that Jim had asked me earlier about the elevations of the building. While under site plan review, we typically have design review as well. Section 3 of the Massachusetts General Law 40A says reasonable regulations regarding bulk and height of structures, yard sizes, lot area, setbacks, open space, parking, and building coverage. So I just wanted to make sure that we understood that we're sort of site plan light based on the Dover Amendment, but they are still subject to those reasonable regulations, and most people believe our regulations are fairly reasonable.
That's what I don't have an understanding on, is what the bulk of this big box looks like on the site. And, you know, compared to the other building there, I mean, we don't have anything for that, and I think that's all we really get to talk about, not the use, but reasonable regulations on the height and size of the building, and when I came, I didn't have any information to make a judgment. I have to make it right now. And I don't know how it compares to the existing building. I kind of feel like I'm missing something.
But we can try to propose a rendering
Thank
from
you.
the street. That might help the
That'd be
board.
great.
Yeah.
That would make life a lot easier.
From the street.
And if it would include information about the materials, that would be
Yeah,
good.
that's,
Because you will see
that's
this.
really what I'm
Right.
asking.
You will see that from the
We'll
road.
see it.
I don't know how far we can go with that. I mean, Tom's just saying all we get to talk about is the bulk. I don't know if we can raise that into building materials and other things, but that's not important. I did want to get a handle on the bulk size of the box.
Sure.
Because that's all we really get to talk about.
Okay.
Now, if that can be provided at another date, I'm fine.
Okay, so a rendering,
A rendering would
what
be
it's going
great.
to look like.
Yep.
Lighting,
Bike racks.
oh yeah, bike racks, because
Plenty of bike
these are
racks, yeah.
students. Come on, we need a bunch of bike racks here.
And there's a nice bike path just down the road.
Yeah, imagine that.
Absolutely. So is there anything else that I'm missing in the summary of what we,
Public comment,
pardon?
public comment.
Yeah, I know, but
We could inquire about solar heat. You've got a lot of new roof area, you've got a lot of old roof area. Are you planning to do anything about change in energy?
I don't believe that there was a solar component that's been adopted yet. I can explore it with the client and see if that's something they're interested in.
now we've kicked this around quite a bit, and I assume there may be public comment out there. So please come up to the podium and state your name.
That's his father's property.
Help you, Dan.
That's sheer right there.
Right.
Doug Shearer, I'm at 30 Chappaqua Road. Couple of more concerns than anything else. Went through conservation, we brought up that the pond that's behind the existing inn is a wildlife sort of sanctuary in itself. Lots of migrating birds, lots of issues there that need to be protected, as well as West Falmouth Harbor. So it is a definite plus that the septic system's going in. We're getting rid of some older systems, so I am all for that. I am, it's been a 40-year battle with keeping the noise down. I love listening to people practice their scales at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. But for the most part, it's a great community asset, and the couple of concerns I have, however, are there was talk when they presented it to the neighbors of other things happening in the off-season, which would not be associated with a school or a nonprofit, such as holding weddings. I think there was a possibility of putting in a yoga studio, other things that would not be the primary use at College Light Opera. I don't know if that is still on the books as a possibility or not, but if other activities are gonna be there, there needs to be parking, there needs to be safety, there needs to be issues with, being a residential neighborhood. I am very concerned if there are 90 people, not all of them are students, so the parking calculation seems a little wonky to me. I believe there was 83 students, they're saying 90, there has to be some staff there. So maybe we look at parking and making sure that down the road, when you guys don't have the opportunity to ever look at this again, and all of a sudden more students do show up, or anything, this is our one and only shot to look at this property and make sure that it's addressed and planned for properly. You have the bike path right next door, you have a ton of traffic, you have a public beach at the end of the road, you have a private beach community down the road, you have a yacht club down the road, you have a ton of kids, cars, issues, parking, lighting, all need to be addressed and should be very important to the neighborhood. If you can get rid of the lighting behind and next to cottage number 3, that's fine with me, I don't wanna look at it. The height, I don't know. To me, it's still an accessory building. Maybe it's not. We're at 25 feet on maximum height on an accessory building. I think it would be highly important to have design review, which is a requirement for you guys, to have plans that maybe the public could comment on, a 120-year-old building, historic building, want it to sort of blend in and fit. I think it would also be highly important to see what it's gonna look like. What else did I circle here? What's the floodplain elevation for the building?
Again, for the record, Tim Santos from Homes of McGrath. Excuse me, the building itself is located in AE elevation 16, and the finished floor will be elevation 17 in accordance with the building code and FEMA.
And lastly, I hope if that road has to be expanded to 18 feet, which is the top of the coastal bank, is the road itself, that's gonna have to go back to conservation, more mitigation plantings, and it falling in their A zone, I'm not sure you're gonna be able to expand it, so it would be nice to be able to get a ladder truck to a 34-foot building. So fire issues in the neighborhood with a bunch of students and so forth, I think would be something to consider as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Kathleen Leone Seeley. I live at 17 Chappaquiddick Road. I've been a part of the West Falmouth community since I was 5 years old and gone by this building many times. What's really important to the neighbors, we've met and discussed this. We're all very concerned about the noise, and I know that's not really an issue for you. That's really comes from the discussion of the use of the property. When we met with Clock, we talked about the use of the property. We did talk about events, and the discussion was that they would happen off-season. Well, a lot of us enjoy our homes here in West Falmouth in the off-season as well. So it might be Clock's off-season, but it's not our off-season. And I think that's really important to all of us. Another thing that I'm concerned about is sort of the view from the road. And I see a leaching field that comes very close to Chappaquiddick Road, and it's a very picturesque road. People are driving by there all the time to get to the beach, the sunset, and so forth. And I really don't want to be driving down the road and looking at a big parking lot. I hope that there's a good buffer left along the road so that it is something that's attractive to look at. I think Clock has been somewhat remiss on the maintenance of the building and the landscaping, and we're all concerned about how this is all going to change now with a new project that's going to cost them a lot more money to maintain and operate. I have a 27-year-old son. He just got a new telescope. He likes to come down and use the telescope in Falmouth because he lives in the city and he can't get the view. Lighting would be important. I hope it's downcasted, but also in the areas where people are walking around. I know in other campus settings, the lighting is low. It's not from above, so it doesn't really affect the overall lighting in the area, which I think is important as well to the birds and the migratory animals in that area. What else did I want to talk about? The traffic, I think, again, it's, and I don't know where to address this, it's the use of the building. And traffic is a concern. We have a lot of cars that go by. I have people just go through the bike path beeping their horn because they don't want to stop. We're right at the corner of the bike path in Chappaquiddick Road, so we see it all there. And the traffic back and forth for the sunset, people speeding down the road to get to the sunset before it sets, and then all the exodus afterwards. So traffic's a concern with that many additional, events. If something were to happen like that, I think the traffic is a big concern, as well as where they're going to be parking the cars. I know lots of people have events down the road and they have to bring in buses and park people elsewhere because there's just not enough parking in the area. So that's a concern. We love Clock. I think they've been a great neighbor. We've had musicians over to come and perform on our porch, and it was lovely. We listened to the scales and the singing and the music, and we don't mind it. But if we have a big performance hall, which means there's a lot more going to be going on there and the noise is going to be louder. One of the other discussions that we had with members of Clock is the building going to be air conditioned? Are there going to be big windows and doors open so that all the sound is, coming from the hall, or is it going to be inside? And we were assured that the building would be air-conditioned. They probably wouldn't have the doors and windows open during their rehearsals because they'll want to keep it more temperate for people. So that, again, is a concern, sort of the impact of all of that to us as neighbors. And I guess that's pretty much the areas of my concern.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to express anything?
My name is Diane Cassidy. I'm also a neighbor of Clock, and I agree with everything my neighbors have raised so far, and I just wanted to reiterate, there were a couple of things that were talked about, and one was that educational is the primary use, and nobody really described a secondary use of what it was, and those are the concerns we have, and things like not maybe weddings, but outdoor concerts and bigger events that we're not accustomed to having in the neighborhood for both parking, noise level. So that was one thing, primary use. In their campaign, capital campaign literature, they had mentioned that there'd be space for a catering alcove that was appropriate for a small bar and concession area. Now, why would you need that in an educational setting if you weren't planning on using it for an event bigger than a rehearsal? Let's see. Also, it said that they'd create an outdoor concert space. So that also brings up the noise level where air conditioning wouldn't even be an issue there. It would be an outdoor concert space. And the beautiful barn has this grand space in the opening at the front where it looks like there'd be places for people to sit and, and hear a concert, which again, we all love as neighbors. We love listening to the music, but if it's going to impact us as a residential area, and if they're going to be using this to hopefully maybe support the buildings, that becomes possibly a non-educational use. They also spoke about not increasing the size of the student population, which is a big concern of ours, because if with that would increase parking spaces, increase, traffic flow and noise level. And of course, I don't know that this is part of anything as in your use and intended use, and if there's anything that can be, when you talk about regulations, you were talking about, I'm sorry, no, it's reasonable regulations. Does that concern noise level, number of people on the property? Is that in reasonable regulations? Or would this just be sort of like a clock saying, this is what we intend to do, but 2 years from now, we have 50 more students? Is there anything in the regulations that would regulate that?
We have noise bylaws.
No, and that would, so number of people, okay,
The
great.
number of people, no, we
Yeah,
can't.
so these are all concerns
Except by
that,
space, it can only be occupied by so many people.
okay, that's 6 acres, is a lot of space. Okay,
I'm talking
Right.
about buildings can only be,
Okay, good.
they're limited.
so, so those are our, so as a neighbor, those are our concerns. We're a residential area, and we'd love to keep it that way. Thank you.
Is there anyone else?
My name is Kristen Shearer. I live at 30 Chappaquoit Road. Our home is located right behind Clock, next to Student Building Number 3. I'm going to say things that I said at the conservation meeting. We are supporters of Clock. We love Clock. But we're here for the long haul. We have children. We're 5 generations of Falmouth. We made our forever home here for those reasons, so our family could be here and enjoy the surrounding area that we live in. I'm a little disappointed. I was really hoping to come here tonight and see some real plans, some real, what is going to be there. And we didn't see any of that tonight. There's nothing that was presented tonight that shows us as a neighbor what the intent is of what is going to be placed on this property. And I think was really poor. I was actually very excited to come here to see what the landscaping was gonna look like, what lighting was gonna be there, what the building was gonna look like, and how it was gonna fit into our community. There was none of that. So I'm really hoping that this will be revisited, where we have the opportunity to see what that's gonna be, because none of that was shown here tonight.
This is what we're asking for when
Yeah.
we're.
This is, so I was just a little bit disappointed. The only other thing that I would like to add of things that you might be looking for, in respect to the new building, will there be soundproofing? Is it going to be an open air kind of building? We didn't see any of that. I don't know if it's gonna be enclosed, if there's gonna be soundproofing. We have we get to hear everything that happens on that property, everything. And it would be nice if there was some sort of way that we could eliminate some of the noise level.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else?
Good evening, my name is Christian Valley, I'm with the Valley Group, and we're the contractor for the building. Just wanted to answer a couple of questions. The new building will be, it will have air conditioning, it will also have a sprinkler system. As far as acoustics, it'll be far more superior to what they are rehearsing in now, which is an old inn. So I guess one could say that hopefully with everything closed, it'll be less noise, because that inn was built in the 1800s and has no acoustics to it. We are planning on doing some acoustical soundproofing in the rehearsal hall of the new inn, so that'll help with the acoustics. In terms of parking and expanding the parking, there is no more room on that site to put more parking. So what we're asking for is, unless we were to either pave over the pond or pave over West Falmouth Harbor, there is no more room. Correct. So the parking is what it is now. It'll just be a better way of parking because of the students there's still going to be 90 students there. So the other issue that came up about the leach field, that's going to be a grass field. So when you're driving down Chapel Quay Road, the leach field, you're not looking at a leach field, you're looking at basically a grass field, which is what you're looking at now. And some of the native, some of the invasive species that are along Chapel Quay Road are going to be removed. I believe there's some Norway maples or some species there that are coming out, but the landscape plan will show that clearer, which we have a copy of. And then in terms of lighting, the site plan showed it, but it's hard to see. We do have some conduits shown going out to the two main entryways, and also conduits out to the parking area for lighting, for future lighting. It has not been picked, but we're sensitive to lighting up the whole place, so that we don't light the whole neighborhood up as well. So we're going to be looking at that as well. Thanks.
Sorry, Mr. Valley, when you say it doesn't show up very well, I agree it doesn't show up very well. You're saying that there are conduits to where you're gonna put a light.
Yeah, it doesn't show the lighting that we're using, but when we pick that, we can share that with the board.
Well, could you at least put on the plan where you plan to have lights?
Yeah, I think it's on the plan, but I'm
Is
not
it?
sure, yeah. And the other thing I wanted to just touch on is on the finishes of the building. We're still working on that. The existing inn is a stucco, and a natural kind of, it's a stucco and it's got some natural wood to it. We're looking at a stucco finish in combination with some other New England materials typical to the Cape in the new building. There'll be some exposed timbers. It'll be a combination of sort of a shingle-style building, but also we'll try to incorporate some of the pieces of the existing building, mainly the stucco, if we can come up with a system that works well with what we want to do. But we'll share all that as well. So, but and then one more thing is there is a rendering. There were a couple renderings done. There are some renderings that are done that show the kind of the juxtaposition of the two buildings from the street. Those were done early on, so we can share those as well.
Okay, thank you.
And I don't know if those conduits show up on the plan, but we are planning on doing some lighting.
We just need to know where it is. That's part of our site plan review.
did,
So,
okay.
thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Paul?
Yeah, I thought there's some very good questions from the neighbors, but the young lady who spoke earlier in green talked about landscaping. And I look at the parking, there's 17 parking spaces facing out toward that large home on the corner of Old Dock Road and Chappaquay Road. And if you look at the landscape plan, it says existing vegetation. It would be nice to add some vegetation there to block the lights across the street. There's 17 parking spaces there, so I think she brings a very good
Oh, yeah.
point.
That's why we need to have a more defined plan for all of this, I think. Tom, when are we gonna see this back again, do you think? 28th, or is that too soon?
Well, I guess that is the question for the applicant.
It is.
When they might be able to have that information available. Our
27th, I guess.
next scheduled meeting, we have one on the 20th, but our next regular scheduled meeting is the 27th.
27th. Is that too soon to get things together? That'll be good?
I'd like to just make a comment.
Yes, Charlotte.
I was a little surprised to hear that the neighbors haven't had a chance to look at the plans. And I wonder if between now and the next time that you're here with more complete plans, there might be an opportunity for the neighbors to see. We were kind of blindsided on the elevations tonight. I mean, but apparently these things exist, they could be made available. I'm reminded of the glamping proposal that came forward that's in a very similar neighborhood, and a huge effort had been made to let the abutters know what was going to look like and how they could suggest changes. It was a very good community process. And for that, well, for any neighborhood, for a building that size and for a change on this scale, I personally think it's a great-looking building, but if you haven't seen it, you don't have an opportunity to make that choice. Maybe it'd be a good thing to be able to have an open house of some sort so people could see and have as many elevations and plans as you could.
Well, plans are always available in the planner's office, too.
That's true.
Not elevations, we haven't seen.
No,
it.
but they will be, but they will be. We're gonna get the elevations, we're gonna get the perspectives, so they should be up there,
And if I may, and when we have them, we will, as our typical practice, post them to our website under the link to plans under review by the planning board.
yeah.
So people can come to the planning office, but but for neighbors, it's easier to have it in the neighborhood. And if they've got them, then, and it's summer, the building's open, just a thought.
Thanks. So we'll see you again on the 27th.
We'll have them all meet at your house, Charlotte.
When's that coming again?
27th. Next, oh dear. What's wrong?
Oh,
No, that's all right.
Trick ankle.
Yeah. I'd have gone to sleep. Ouch. Okay, moving on, we're going to creation of design standards in conjunction with the Falmouth zoning bylaw. And Tom, you were going to speak to this, I believe.
Yes, ma'am. As you know, we have started our hearing process on design standards that the Cape Cod Commission had prepared. And I think, for the most part, those discussions have gone pretty well with the board. I wasn't at the last meeting. Two of the things that I've talked about to members of the board as I've talked to you, as well as to staff, is to include provisions for accommodating solar in our design regulations. We talk about all the time about how solar, much like the Dover Amendment, subject to reasonable regulation. So if we have the capacity to look at incorporating solar into our design standards, and we talk about them during the course of our hearings, and we adopt them, then that, to me, smacks of a reasonable regulation. We've looked at things, we've talked about things, we've compared things. The trouble is, there isn't a whole lot of design standards out there for solar. Moving forward with our potential zoning changes and things like that, pulling buildings to the front of the street as we move forward with that. That will naturally push parking and things like that to the rear of the building, which is what is by design, which is, we talked about for years during Davis Straits. The Cape Cod Commission talks about it. So we would look at trying to incorporate both solar on the site. The other thing that we have currently in our zoning bylaw is a little diagram that talks about what a parking lot looks like, aisle widths, parking spaces, and things like that. I'd also like to port that information from the zoning bylaw in their design standards, because it allows us a bit more flexibility in looking at those design standards for parking. Because if it's zoning and somebody wants an aisle width that's 23 and a half foot because there's some wetland resource that they can't, that's a variance. And to me, that's a design standard that the board could waive if it's in the public interest and isn't anathema to the zoning bylaw. So as we look at what you folks are looking at, we're also looking at including some additional elements into that, which I think would give us a very good design package in general. Regarding solar, I recently, when I go on trips, my family looks at me, what are you doing? Because I take pictures of stuff. So in Chico, California, at the Sierra Nevada Brewery, I was there for unofficial business on vacation. It was 97 degrees out on the patio, so I didn't sit out on the patio, but the patio had solar, and there was solar in the parking lot next to it. So I was out there snipping pictures of how they'd landscape things and how they put things together for that. So I think that what we want to add to our design regulations is also those aspects that we want to have in our design as we move forward in the modern era in trying to make people and buildings more prominent than cars in parking lots.
What we're talking about here is that the board liked the Cape Cod Commission design that we were handed out. We haven't voted it yet. We liked it. And the only thing that has anything to do with energy efficiency is number 11 on page 32, incorporate energy efficient or green architecture in the design.
Mhm.
And what Tom is talking about is to give solar a more obvious, impactful placement in here by making it its own, and probably it could come after number 11 and become number 12, and, you know, so we're adding into this to make it our own, and putting parking in here too, to make it our own design manual.
Could I ask a question?
Of course.
I think it's a good idea about the solar. I can't see that there would be any objection to that. If we were to take the parking requirement out of our current bylaws and move it into this, don't we have to go to town meeting to do that? Whereas one of the advantages of taking these actually as guidelines is we don't do that. We have the flexibility not to do that. Is that right?
Well, and what I propose to do is to bring an article to town meeting in November that says this diagram that's in section 104A, that we would remove that from the zoning bylaw and reference the design guidelines, so we wouldn't have conflicting bylaws. So as we're moving forward with adopting our subdivision site plan design regulation, we would essentially have this in place, and then with the town meeting vote to remove this from the bylaw, we would have it just in one spot and remove that conflict. Nothing changes on the parking count. I know that Bob would very much like us to be rewriting our parking bylaw, minimizing some of the requirements for parking and things like that. There's not a professional planner that I've met who thinks we should have more parking for what we have. But that's still a bit of a reach for where we're at right now. That hopefully will come out of some of our design guidelines and things that are looking at form-based code and things like that. Just looking at those design components. But I think that it behooves us to have particularly when the issues are designed, to have them in a regulation that allows us to waive it if it's in the public benefit, rather than having someone have to go to the ZBA to get a variance for a 23-foot, two-wide parking aisle in front of the parking.
Could I ask another process question? If and when we approve these, and we certainly seem inclined to do it, talk us through exactly how that changes the discussion when we come to site plan review and design review. Would all the developers coming to your office, would they receive copies of this? So that they'd know this is what we're going to be thinking about when they come before us?
Yeah, we would, there are hard copies of everything, but the majority of folks these days look at things digitally. So we would have hard copies that we produced of them. They would be available on our website as well as in a format that we could deliver to somebody if they needed it.
But it would be part of the materials they know, they have a checklist.
Correct.
This is what you need to be looking at, what we need to receive back. It would become part of that.
Correct, and this gets back into just sort of moving the ball from our current regulations that have been, you know, awaiting some attention.
Okay.
Right, and we, Seven, would also use it to guide our conversation.
Yeah, because we've all been in this room where people said, I like how pick a town on the Cape did this thing. And that's, that's very nice of us to recognize the merits of those other towns, but a little awkward for us to say, we'd like you to build what some other town has. So we'd like to incorporate those. So we're doing design regulation. Both the applicant knows what the expectation is, and the board has some sort of standard to point that. And the nice thing about the Cape's updated is it's pictures, and pictures make it easy for people to figure out what things are supposed to look like and how they're supposed to look.
Right, it's a real step forward.
So this would be the staff acting on, I'm putting more work on you, the staff acting on what we like and creating the wording to go into here in a picture or two to illustrate what we're thinking of. So if we want to put another whole section on solar, then that would be the staff creating that section on solar to give it its importance in our design review.
And in addition to us looking at those sort of things, I've also reached out to the Energy Committee that if they had any particular things that they had come across that they thought were useful and effective for solar design, that I would welcome to see what sort of research they turned up as well.
So Mr. Walker can feel that he's had an effect.
Well, he's not on the Energy Committee, as he will
No,
tell
he's
you when he
not,
gets
but he's
up there, but he
been
goes to
before
every
us.
meeting. No, sorry to put words in your mouth, Mr. Walker.
Okay,
Okay,
so we're looking at solar and parking to add to this. Yeah,
Just to
Paul.
were you suggesting there be a separate section on solar alone, or just a numerical next number? to
Well,
be-
that
for
makes
the
it a separate
emphasis?
section.
Be a separate section?
Yes,
That would
because
imply an emphasis.
if you look at this, incorporate energy efficient or green architecture in the design. So,
That's different.
yes, it is. So if you follow through with, we're looking to have energy efficiency.
I think what it says to me is, there are gonna be pictures about it.
Yes.
So maybe they would come from the beer place, or they would come from somewhere else, but there would be pictures to illustrate what we think would be a good
Right.
character for solar energy.
With a separate section, it would provide some emphasis that's important,
Okay,
rather than just burying it as a
Right.
paragraph at the end.
Right.
the way they've put this together is they say building strategy 11A. Okay, you go to the next one, building strategy 12A, 12B, 12C. So we can put as much descriptive as to what we want under there, but it's abbreviated because it's not a bylaw.
Right.
So it gives directions to what we're looking for. Jim, you had a question?
Yeah, well, I understand. First of all, I want to say, I really think the guidelines are great. I think I'm not ready to adopt them the way they are. But even though it's not a bylaw, I would really like to have a hearing where that is sent out to different groups and they come in and comment on it, so that when we say, hey, this is what we're gonna do, they say, well, we never heard about that. I'd like to force the issue to the ZBA or any other group, developers, and just have them review it and give us the feedback. Because that's when we do the best work, is when we listen to what other people have to say and go through with the process. So I'd like to process it, is what I'm saying.
Well, in terms of processing though, we like this, but I think to actually adopt it, we should go through it point by point to say,
Right.
yes, we like this, yes, but we
publicly-
want this word changed.
But wait, isn't there an interim step? The staff is going to work on it, going to make two
Oh, no, no,
additions
no,
that we
I'm
just
talking
talked
about,
about.
we haven't adopted this
No, we
yet.
have not, but before we do
Mhm.
adopt it, the staff is going to be adapting it for Falmouth. So we would see the completed document that the staff is proposing, maybe that's what we would hold
Right.
hearings on.
Yes, that's
Right.
what I'm just getting the hearing.
Right.
That's my conclusion.
Right.
That's exactly
So
what
that
it's
would be the
Yeah.
process.
Yeah, it is my intent to have that out to folks. I did not get that done earlier in the summer. I don't get everything done every day, but it is still our intent to get that out to the design community and ask for their feedback on this as well.
Oh, to the design community, are you saying the same thing as Jim, or is
Yeah,
that something different?
builders, architects,
yeah.
engineers.
I think residents would be interested.
Well, they
There's-
should be, everybody
right,
should be.
So it should be a hearing
Yeah.
where everyone's invited.
So we do a presentation and get
Yeah.
comments on it. Okay, so clock is moving on, and
Oh,
we spent an awful lot
Thought
of
we
time
finished with clock.
on the Cape Club. Okay. Changes to the Falmouth subdivision regulations, and this is Jim McLaughlin who came in and told us, one of the main things I got out of what he was saying is that we didn't have any good forms to fill out to follow with, to illustrate making it easier for our builders. And Tom, you were going to give a little bit more illustration, or?
Yes, and that is a work in progress. So I don't have the documents we were hoping to have for you for today's meeting, showing those changes that have been discussed with engineering on inspections and things. I don't have that markup for you that you'd ask about. So with that, I'd ask that the board continue that, as well as the design standards, until our meeting on the 27th. But we do have, as part of that hearing process, Mr. Walker wanted to comment on our design regulation as well, and I believe he has a presentation.
And this is why it fit in here, because we're talking about solar. So, Mr. Walker? And I'm hoping his presentation will give us some additional ideas, perhaps, that we can incorporate. And you do have his presentation in here in our folder, too.
Yeah.
oh, where?
It's, pull this
Right
up
underneath
there,
your thumb?
it's at the back of it.
No, sorry with the cursor.
What, is it
No,
this
this
one?
is,
Oh, then it's the wrong one.
Oh, with the cursor,
Oh,
I
yeah,
see what
no,
you're
no.
saying, I'm sorry.
That's
no,
okay.
this is the road.
It's behind the,
How do I get back to the other one?
Just down.
Escape or,
Up or down?
oh, yes, but,
Here it
to
is.
get back to the other.
Yeah, escape.
Escape, okay, very good, thanks. Well, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight, and I also would like to thank the planning department, Mr. Bod and Mr. Pacheco. They were very helpful, very welcoming, and very helpful in my getting my stuff on the machine and getting ready for tonight. So, and I'd like to follow up on what Mr. Bott said about solar. What I wish to speak to you about tonight is zero energy efficiency, which includes renewable energy like solar, but a lot of other things, in a sense, before you put solar on. In other words, the idea of energy efficiency, to not waste energy, is perhaps just as, or maybe some people believe, more important than putting on solar or and other kinds of renewable energy. So I want to talk about net zero energy, and I'm going to use the concepts developed by a builder out in the state of Washington, the Pacific Northwest coast of the United States. He's been building homes on Whidbey Island, which is in Puget Sound. It's not unlike Cape Cod, I believe. I've never been there, but I see it on the map. It's in the Pacific Ocean. It's got lots of other islands and land masses around it, not too far from it. But I imagine it to be a place somewhat like Cape Cod. So I'm drawing upon that builder for
net zero energy concepts. Then I'm going to show you a brief video, if I may, by a developer in Arvada, Colorado, a neighborhood called Geos. Now, that's something that I presented to you back on May 14th. That's the attempt to develop a whole community or mixed-use village, if you will, that is net zero in terms of energy. So that incorporates solar and energy efficiency. Finally, if I have time, I'm going to make a brief statement about affordable housing and all of these things, because there's a wonderful experiment going on in Washington, D.C. right now with affordable housing and solar and resiliency. So, here we go. So as I said, I want to talk about net zero fossil fuel energy and resilience tonight. And I have to say, I believe that all of you, and perhaps others, know a lot more than I do about this. I'm just trying to take the opportunity to, perhaps as you suggested, suggest these ideas for your consideration in the design guidelines. I'm not an expert in any of these things. I look around, I read. I hope to just prompt an interest in these things. So here's an example of the Geos community. Buildings where people work and live on the upper floors. They have solar, perhaps a good bit more than Mashpee Commons, but something of that sort. But beyond solar, they're energy efficient and net zero in terms of fossil fuel energy. So what is this all about? It's for the design standards in conjunction with the Falmouth zoning bylaw. Here's an example of something from the Cape Cod Commission, because I've drawn some of the ideas from that. I think it's called Context for Design on Cape Cod, large-scale development. And from our comprehensive plan, we want here in Falmouth energy self-sufficiency and independence. And here's an image, for that. Energy self-sufficiency and independence, a worthwhile goal. We also want to shift public and private investments to a sustainable, renewable energy economy if we can. A lot of benefits to that. So we can ask, how much is a renewable energy economy worth? How much will that be worth for the town of Falmouth? That's a very important consideration. Now, let's take a look at the 12 steps to net zero. This is based on builder Ted Clifton out there on Whidbey Island in Puget Sound. Step number 1, let the ridges of all the buildings run east and west. Let the buildings be positioned and oriented for maximum solar access. You're going to get another look at that in the video that I will show. Step number 2, make it a simple design. Clifton recommends making the footprint as square as possible, even recommends making buildings cubes. I don't know if that's always going to work for every purpose of every building, but the idea is to limit the exterior wall area. That limits exposure, that limits the loss of energy, that saves cost. Step number 3, have most of your windows facing south with overhangs. Few windows east and west, almost no windows north. Keep the energy inside. Let the energy of the sun come in during the wintertime underneath those overhangs. Let those overhangs shade you in the summertime. Save cost of and energy for heating and cooling. Number 4, thermal mass. Floors and countertops can absorb heat during the daytime, and they can release heat during the cooler night. Step number 5, seal the building tight. Limit air leakage. What Clifton uses are these structural insulated panels. I see I blended the word foot with the word structural there, so I'm sorry about that. But he uses these 8 by 24 feet long structural insulated panels. That can be an entire wall on the side of a building with windows that are pre-cut. That makes for real quick assembly in his experience, saves cost. And with those panels tightly sealed, instead of losing about 30% of the energy due to air leakage, you might lose, according to builder Clifton, only 1 or 2%. Got to seal carefully. Step number 6, balance the insulation value of the ceiling, the walls, and the windows. Don't have it real good one place and not so good in another. Balance it, and he says you'll get overall efficiency and you will lower energy costs much more than adding more insulation. Balance is the key. Step number 7, I guess I forgot the number 7 there. Energy recovery ventilation. Balance the air you're pulling in with the air you're pushing out. Balance. And use these high-efficiency particulate air filters, HEPA filters. Step number 8, go for as efficient systems as you can get for heating and cooling. It's less costly to move heat than it is to create or generate heat. You could use geothermal sources, such as in this image here where you see the tubes buried next to the foundation of the house. I spoke to a local Falmouth builder here recently. He built a house, he says, or I'm not sure if he said he built it himself or he knew of someone who built it, where their tube went down 700 feet down. But all the way down, once you get down to a certain level, I understand, I've never been there, there's a constant temperature of about 50 to somewhere between 50, 60 degrees. You could also use solar thermal collectors on the roof to heat water, run that through the system as your source of heat. Step number 9, go for domestic hot water efficiency, as efficient as you can get. This is all the efficiency stuff. We're not even at solar yet in the 12 steps of net zero fossil fuel energy. So you got a hot water tank that runs the heated water from the heat pump or the solar thermal panels through a coil. And that heats the water in the hot water tank, and then you use that for showers, washing dishes, and so on. Step number 10, shop carefully. Go for appliances that are as efficient as possible. Clifton goes way beyond Energy Star for refrigerators and clothes washing machines and stoves and dryers and so on. Step number 11, efficient lighting. Use natural light. It's free. It comes in the windows if you got them. And if you have lighting, let it be LEDs. And his idea is to light surfaces rather than spaces. Now, I don't know if I've achieved an image of that I selected here, but why light up a whole space when what we really need is light on the surfaces where you're sitting and where I'm standing, for example. We don't have to necessarily light up a whole space. Why waste all that lighting? Save energy. Finally, step number 12, put the solar panels on. But, as he says, if you don't do step number 1 through 11 for all that efficiency, the solar panels will never get you to net zero fossil fuel energy. So, those are Ted Clifton's 12 steps. Now I would like you to take a look at the video, which will show us zero energy on a larger scale, a village or neighborhood scale. So, I will, I gotta close that down. Yeah, here we go. So hopefully here comes
Colorado Sunshine is a unique asset for creating sustainable living neighborhoods, and Arvada is a great place to demonstrate its feasibility. The GEOS neighborhood shows fossil fuel-free living is technically possible and economically affordable.
the overhangs, look at the
I'm Norbert Klebel, and I'm the developer of a community in Arvada called Chios Neighborhood. And where we started is in all the details to really reduce the actual energy requirements. We were able to reduce the total energy requirement by 75%. The first third of the savings came from passive solar orientation of all the buildings by offsetting the homes. Traditionally, all the homes are built in one row, and we offset them in such a way that the distance between those two houses would allow that on the December 21st, when the sun is the lowest of the year, the shade will only reach the bottom of the neighboring building. The second third of energy savings comes from a high-performance shell. We increased the insulation and we put in some very good triple pane windows. We really, however, exceeded the industry by making these buildings airtight. Traditional homes exchange the air every 3 or 4 hours, ours every 20 hours, which saves an enormous amount of energy. The remaining 1/3 came from a new mechanical system. This system is based on energy recovery ventilation, which means we are pulling the waste air from the bathrooms and the kitchen into an air exchanger, and whenever we blow out waste air, we bring the same amount of fresh air in, and in the process transfer the energy. Instead of heating up the outside air from, let's see, 20 degrees to 70 degrees, we only have to heat it up from like 65 degrees to 70 degrees. These buildings use only about 3,000 kilowatt hours of electricity for heating and cooling per year. The rest is the plug loads, appliances, for the lights, for gadgets which use electricity. All our lights are now LEDs, replaced the standard appliances with a high energy performance line from Bosch and using heat pump water heaters. Combined with the water heater and the appliances and the LEDs, we were able to reduce the 9,000 kilowatt hours which American homes using right now to about 3,000 to 4,000 kilowatt hours. The entire home, heating, cooling, ventilation, and all the plug loads consumes only about 7,000 kilowatt hours a year. And so we put 5 kilowatt of solar systems on there, which totally satisfy the needs. Our systems are designed that you can set it and can leave it. It's all self-managed. But we also offer people to manage it and therefore save some more.
Probably not the architectural styles that we would prefer here on Cape Cod, but that's not the point. It's the energy efficiency thing and the solar thing. Okay. Finally, I can scroll down here a bit. Yeah. This is the Maycroft Apartment Building in Washington, D.C., where a wonderful experiment is taking place. This is all affordable housing, 64 apartments, and I think they say, if I recall, 40 of those apartments are renting for $600 or between $600 and $700. So it's not a high-income building. It's affordable housing. But they have solar panels on the roof, and those solar panels, in combination with other solar panels located nearby, not on the building, not on the property, but a community solar operation where they are able to share some of that renewable energy produced by that community solar array. That plus the solar panels on this building reduces the electricity cost for each apartment owner by $40 to $50 a month. And I think that's probably a pretty big thing to people who are paying $600 a month in rent. And there's, the people who did this, they're committed to the idea that everyone should share in the new era that we are coming into with renewable energy and solar power and energy efficiency. So we can't just simply let people go and feel like they're outsiders in the new world that is developing all around us, simply because they're poor or low-income people. But in addition, they have battery storage in the basements of this building, so that some of that electricity is sent to the batteries, and of course, some electricity from the grid is sent to the batteries, keeping them charged. And those batteries are capable of running a community center that they have on the first floor of this building for 3 days. Probably as the years go on, it'll get to be a longer thing. We probably all are aware that battery storage technology is really moving quickly these days. So the city of Washington, D.C. can go out, and the people, the poor people in this Maycroft apartment building can survive at least 3 days. They can call people on their phones, they can charge their phones, they can get the news, they got refrigerators for them, they got microwave ovens where they can warm up their food and so on. So energy efficiency, renewable energy like solar, go for zero, net zero fossil fuel energy, and make it resilient. This is an opportunity as I see it, so I hope you will consider these ideas in your design standards.
Thank you.
You very much.
Thank you.
Okay. We have a request to withdraw site plan review application for La France Hospitality Group, and so we'll need a motion to say, yeah, we accept their withdrawal. But there's more to it than that. They would like to see their $6,000 returned to them from the town, and our engineers and other people have spent considerable time. And so maybe a portion of that, I don't know what would be reasonable to be returned. A couple thousand, maybe, I don't know.
Well, if I may?
Yes, Tom.
We got this request in, and I submitted the question to town council, that we obviously have, there have been 2 applications for this project to the town. The first one was withdrawn and then reapplied the first time around. We waived the application fee for the second time around. So this is the second time around. So we've reviewed it internally. Engineering has looked at it. It's not a heavy lift, but the processing that we have done through those various departments and referrals to Cape Cod and our ongoing conversations with the Cape Cod Commission on the DRI review, I think it's appropriate to retain some of that to cover the expense we've had. Not full on $6,000, but the question is with Frank, well, what seems to be a reasonable number? So I had suggested in a draft motion that the move that the town accept the second withdrawal of the La France Hospitality Site Plan Review without prejudice and return the appropriate prorated application fee as determined by staff and town council.
Somebody want to move that?
I have a question.
Sure.
According to a letter from council, they're expecting $6,000 to be returned from the commission. Is the commission taking the same attitude, that there was a cost involved in their review?
Well, actually, I think the letter says the commission will be returning approximately $30,000 in the filing fees.
I'm sorry, 30,000.
So the commission is, chances are, and Jonathan and I have just sort of, we haven't talked about particular numbers, but for the most part, these things aren't profit centers. These are just to cover your cost application fees. So we just want to make sure that we've got a reasonable number.
So they're going to return the entire 30,000?
I do not know what the commission's going to do. But the commission can't do anything until we accept the withdrawal of the application, because we refer it to the commission. And so the commission has 2 options at this point based on where they're at in their review. They're bumping up against their statutory deadline, and as in the conversation I had with Jonathan Eidman, as I recounted in my memo, they don't really have enough information from the applicant to move forward with their DRI review. So the commission's options are, we can deny it without prejudice, so they don't have a constructive approval from the commission, or the town can withdraw the application, which would, when we notify the commission of that effect, the commission will essentially close the books on that as well. With our withdrawal, it's withdrawn from the commission, so the commission will return whatever they're going to return. No one's talked about any particular numbers, because this came in a couple weeks ago, and we're just sort of processing how that's going to work.
John?
If they reapply, do they have to pay another $6,000?
They'd have to pay the application fee based on what that is. I'm not sure that $6,000 was the appropriate fee to start with. Apparently, the $6,000 fee that was paid was based on 30 residential units or more. And since it's actually a commercial accommodation, I don't know that's residential units. So assuming that they're going to reapply, we would look and make sure they have the appropriate fee that they'd be paying.
Or whatever it is, they would have to pay the whole fee again.
That'd be my interpretation, because we waived it the first time, we're giving it back the second, and so we give back money, then they need to pay the application fee to reapply.
Madam Chair, if I may for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't submit the letter requesting the withdrawal, but my office did, and I had some conversations with Attorney Terry, who did submit the letter. Just a little clarification, we did withdraw and reapply, but that was done at the request of the Cape Cod Commission, because they were in the process of changing their regulations. So we met with Mr. Bod and Mr. Eidman, and it was requested from us that we withdraw, then reapply in order that would be processed entirely into the new regulations. So that was the initial withdrawal. The issue presently is the applicant is struggling to contend with the cost of the build as designed in a way that's profitable for the eventual build out of the hotel. So they've been looking at ways to revamp the plans, but haven't been able to do so in a quick enough manner to provide updated plans to the Cape Cod Commission. So in our conversations with Mr. Eidman, it was determined that our best way forward would be to withdraw the application. My understanding, and I could very well be wrong, I've been wrong before, I'm sure I will again, is that the commission does intend to return, I believe, the entirety of the application. So our thought was, why not simply ask to see if the planning board would as well? There's no expectation, but we thought that you cannot say no unless we ask, so we're asking.
Well, I think the
I just
motion,
want to
sure.
follow up on that. I'm a little uncomfortable with the thing that to be saying the appropriate, the prorated application fee as determined by the staff and town council. That could be the entire $6,000, that could be a nominal amount. How do you determine what's the appropriate fee on something like that? I mean, you can count up how many hours the town planner, assistant town planner, and others worked on it and figure that out, but that doesn't seem to be the way to go. It seems to be a nominal amount, but I'm uncomfortable because it doesn't say anything here about how you do that.
Well, a few years ago in Kingston, we had someone challenge our fees. So we actually went out and we looked at what it costs to review an application, and we asked everybody who applied to those, who's the person who does that, what's their hourly rate, and how much time would they typically spend on a plan. So we would be doing sort of a truncated version of that. I'd go just reach out to those folks and say, what sort of time we got invested in this. And I would imagine that they're going to get the lion's share of that $6,000 back. We're not going to get them back, $50, $60. We're going to look at what our costs are, within the within that scale. But it's once again, my modus operandi, I haven't figured it out yet, is how do we make it easy for people to get things done within the regulations and rules, and make it so that this is a place where people want to come and build and develop things and stuff like that. So I'm always looking at, what is the impact of our actions on other folks? So I'd be looking at, making sure that, we're fine, and we'd give them back most of their money. If you guys want to make up a number, you can, but I think it's probably better to accept the withdrawal and let us sort that out.
I'm fine with the motion as it's written.
The commission would very much like to know what's going on, so because if not, they have to schedule a meeting to withdraw, to deny the application without prejudice, to stop them from having a constructive approval.
So Bob, you want to make the motion as written?
As written.
Oh.
You want me to read it?
Yes.
That the town accept the second withdrawal of the La France Hospitality Site Plan Review without prejudice and return the appropriate prorated application fee as determined by staff and town council.
Second.
Been moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Update of administrative approval request for 587 Main Street, and Tom has been working on that.
Alrighty. Because the hour is late, I don't want to belabor this, but we have been working with the applicant. We had understood that there was a push to try to get the building open for the weekend. So I had had some conversations with the applicant after I got back about where we were with the site plan. Most of those issues were fairly well resolved. We didn't have them all illustrated on a plan. So I told our building commissioner, if you're comfortable with the ADA requirement that they've got to meet with, because that's not negotiable to make sure that you can get in the building under the Architectural Access Board, that I would be willing to sign off, as the board has authorized me, on a temporary CO until we had all of those things that we sort of agreed on, shown on a plan. So that morning, they were actually out there with railings to install on the building. So I told Rod, looks like we've got good news, looks like they're gonna get it done. Rod went out and did the inspection to realize that they didn't have the proper railings in for a commercial building. There's a different requirement for a residential building versus a commercial building. So in spite of our efforts to try to get them open for the weekend, they didn't have the ADA accessibility squared away. They've got to order some more goodies, and so that's where we're at right now. We're ready to get them open. They just need to get that last component of the ADA compliance in, show the rest of the things in the site plan, and then they'll be good to go.
Okay. Any questions? No. Request for administrative approval for Messer, 190 Goleta Drive.
Okay, I'll recuse myself.
Oh, go ahead. I'm
Good
sorry.
evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. For the record, my name is Kevin Clower. I'm an attorney with Ahmed Clower Law Firm here in Falmouth, and I represent the applicants Tom and Marisha Messer, the owners of 190 Goleta Drive. As this board likely remembers, there was a site plan approval issued for this property in March of 2018 for an accessory apartment located in a detached accessory structure. Condition 1 of that plan, of that decision states that any changes to the plan should be reviewed by the planning board to determine if a modification is necessary. So we're here tonight to seek review and approval on some changes that were made due to existing conditions and unexpected issues that arose during the development. There's 3 significant changes that have occurred. The grading on the northwest corner of the site is different than what was proposed, and this is due to the amount of material that ended up being necessary to be stripped out in order to install the septic system. So the installer was required to take out much more material than was expected, and as a result of the amount of material that came out, the grade changed, and the installer ended up having to install a retaining wall to mitigate that change. So the second change is this installation of the concrete retaining wall along this northwestern or western boundary here. And then the applicants are also seeking approval for proposed steps and landing on essentially the southern side of the building, right here. We believe that these changes are still essentially in nature and in line with the original approved plan, and shouldn't constitute a full modification of the site plan decision. I know that there was a previous application that did have some more significant changes, including a proposed second driveway. Those plans have been abandoned. So those are the changes that we're seeking administrative approval on, if possible. And I'd be happy to address any questions that this board might have.
I have a question. Have you already done this work?
It was done because.
So you're asking for it after you've already done the work?
We are, because the septic installer ended up taking out much more material than he anticipated.
I think it's changed the view of the building, the look drastically. You know, it's much more,
So the only thing that can be done
why
to,
wouldn't you come to us before you do the work?
because the septic installer was forced to take out much more material than he anticipated, and was in the process of taking it out. I don't know how you stop the septic installation.
Well, if it doesn't fit the design, you stop and come back and get approval again. Not go ahead, finish it, and then come back and say, well, this is now you have to approve it.
Well, I think that there are mitigating circumstances that can arise.
Anybody else?
Has anyone been out to see the site?
I haven't yet, no.
No, and it's hard to make out the pictures because they're so dark.
I was out there some months ago before this was done.
Well, you should look at it now.
Does anybody else have?
Maybe we should do a visit.
Okay, well, my comment is, actually, I've got a few, that I disagree that these are insignificant changes. When I look at the engineer's comments on this, well, some of these things are in the town right-of-way. The retaining wall is in the town right-of-way for all that excess material. Now, fine, I agree that the siltation in the roadway, that needs to be cleaned up, swept up. Structure is slightly larger than it was. We ran into that before, than it was planned for, okay? And the runoff, no downspouts, where are the dry wells?
Well, the project's not done yet. The downspouts have been ordered and they will be installed. The project's not complete.
Is there a dry well?
There is a dry well.
Okay, because our engineer said no indication of a dry well.
The dry well is not reflected on his plan, and we'll ask the engineer to change that, but
Okay.
the dry well was installed.
And let's see, there was no driveway permit completed. So, we need that. Recommended stormwater mitigation measures, because there is erosion and there needs to be sediment control.
That's been addressed and is being addressed with the plans. I mean, the changes to the plan resulted from an unexpected development in the installation of the septic system. Mr. Fox, respectfully, I disagree that most people would stop the installation of the system mid-strip out to apply to the planning board. I think that there are circumstances where it makes sense that something of that nature.
Well, you know, when I've done strip outs, we put things back, so it still looks the same. This is a strip out and you've changed the elevation. Did you have to do that? Could the soil's been brought back and the way it was originally planned? I wouldn't have a problem if you did that.
I don't think they could, and I can't explain exactly why, because I wasn't there, nor am I entirely familiar with the process, but I was told that that wasn't possible.
I think we all should, if you haven't seen it before you vote on it, I really think you should go out and look at it, because I think it's impacted the effect.
This is
That's what
not,
I'm gaining from the engineer's report too, and I personally feel that handing it over for administrative, I don't like that.
They can't undo it.
Well, I think we've totally lost the architectural effect of a single-family home. It's almost a joke.
Okay,
And this exacerbates the issue, this one thing by not replacing this unforeseen condition and modifying it, I believe has made it even worse.
and how does a utility pole get put in the town right away?
I don't know.
Okay? There are a lot of things, and I don't know whether we want to put the remedy on our administrators. And that's a board decision. It's a question that we have to answer because this is the request tonight.
so, just a few quick comments. I think that the engineering department raised some legitimate concerns and legitimate issues that need to be addressed. One of those is a license, applying for a license with the Board of Selectmen for the very end of the retaining wall there. As to the utility pole, I mean, the applicant contacted the utility, and I don't know how a utility installs a utility pole without going through a pole hearing. But it's not as though they went out and put that up themselves. They contacted National Grid or whatever the appropriate utility was, NSTAR, and they hired a contractor, and that contractor put it up. I think the expectation, as with any time you hire someone of that nature, is that they're pulling the appropriate permits. That was news to us, that it was done inappropriately. Frankly, a poll hearing is something that I wasn't familiar with. It's something I've just simply never heard of.
It's probably because we don't do it, the utility companies take care of it.
Exactly. So when they contacted.
DPW does it, they have
Is it?
hearings.
Okay.
Well, it's done through the Traffic Advisory Committee. I've since learned. But it's not something that I was familiar with. So, I think that there are things that need to be addressed, and the applicant's going to take those steps to remedy that, but that's a lot of the issues that you've mentioned, I think, fall outside of the site plan. There are issues that do exist, and I'm not debating that in the slightest, and they need to be remedied. But I'm not sure how that ties in necessarily with the site plan review. I think, it has changed the grade, Mr. Fox, quite honestly, it has. But it's not.
It's drastically changed the architectural effect.
It has.
So, I mean, if, and I suppose we'll have to discuss this if we go through a full modification, but we have to figure out how to remedy it.
Paul?
Well, it's not a shrug, Mr. Fox. It's not a, we.
No, it's your job. We need to come back with landscaping, additional things, changes that offset, not just say, oh, we had to do this and you have to take it.
Okay.
We're not saying that. We're here for that reason.
What is your question, Paul?
With all due respect, I have a problem with the statement in your letter saying changes do not alter the previously approved plans. I don't believe that's the case. I think there's been significant changes to what was approved.
I want to note that I said, I
find that
believe.
as rather,
I said, I believe, because I think that the overall nature of the plan remains the same.
well, I'm just stating my opinion. I think there've been significant changes since what was approved, including retaining wall, including a lot of other things that happened. There were significant changes there, whether it's your opinion or not. My opinion is different.
So what does the board want to do? We've got two choices. They come back to us, or we hand it to the administration.
I think if we really want to know what we're doing, we would go take a look.
We have to do
I'm
that
finding
too.
these, maybe it's just me, but the pictures, I think an effort was made to show what happened, but it's not clear what happened.
From a clarification standpoint, I think it's pretty clear which way we're heading. And I guess this is directed towards Mr. Bott. Will this constitute a request for modification? Do I need to submit a separate request for a site plan modification?
That'd be my take, that you'd reapply.
Okay.
With the revised plans to show what the conditions are
Okay.
that you prefer.
So we'll get some updated plans. So, I mean, there were issues raised by the engineering comment that we'll make sure are reflected on the revised plans that came in on Friday. So we'll update those plans to reflect those comments as much as we can. And I can, if it would make this evening, make the issue easier, we're happy to withdraw the request for a modification and or for an accessory, sorry.
Administrative approval.
Administrative approval, thank you. I'm still recovering from some travel this weekend, and that went poorly. We'll be happy to withdraw the request for administrative approval, and we'll submit an application for modification to the site plan.
I think that's better all the way around, considering what we're seeing, the engineer's report as to what's different. And I think, yes, we do need to go out and take a good look at it, too. So, thank you.
All right, wonderful, thanks, guys.
Okay, Planning Board Policies and Procedures Manual, and it is getting on. So can we skip that until the 20th, perhaps? Tom says thumbs up on that. Okay, items for joint meeting with Board of Selectmen scheduled for September 16, which is coming up rather quickly. And we've just got a list, I think.
Do we have a list of items?
Yeah, they're,
Do.
yeah,
Where's that?
it was in the back sleeve.
Is it in our packet? It's in my computer.
back's the
It's not.
Find mine.
So amongst those items that we had talked about previously, updating the Board of Selectmen on the zoning recodification and the new design review policy, discussions for affordable housing, density for housing, possibly looking at 20 to 24 units per acre in line with the Cape Cod Commission. The current bylaw says 6 units per acre, 8 with a special permit. I understand, and I don't want to anybody reading ahead, but I understand we're going to have a presentation at our next planning board meeting on the 20th about some of these costs for density. So we'll see some of those things in the interim. 40R for Davis Straits as an effective multifamily and affordable housing bylaw. I have reached out to the folks at DHCD to ask if they would be available on our meeting to come down and give us sort of a thumbnail sketch of what 40R is and how it works. It is essentially, while 40B is the stick for affordable housing, 40R is the carrot, and I think it has a lot of benefits potentially to the town. We would require the buy-in of both the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board to get to that point. Sewage capacity and coastal resilience, and I think it was John Drewley maybe representing for Paul Dreyer, who wasn't here, to make sure that coastal resiliency was on the agenda.
You did.
So you got people looking out for you when you're not here. So that is the current list that we've got for discussion with the Board of Selectmen. Whether we want to talk about creating a planning department or not, that is certainly something that's been discussed in the past, the community development department, whether that's something we want to talk about at the joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen. It's one of those things we've talked about previously. And I don't think we've had a sort of a discussion about that, but whether the board wants to entertain something like that as well. So that's our current list. We want to put something certainly together for the Board of Selectmen by our next meeting to say, here's the list of things we want to talk about. So whatever that list is, I'd love to get your cards and letters in, get it back to the board before our meeting on the 27th. Clarify that that's what we want to talk about, and get a memo up to Julian and company so they know those items that we very much love to talk about.
Could you send us that list?
I can.
Yeah.
Would you please? That'd be very helpful. You went through it quickly, too quickly for me to.
Well, right
really-
offhand, is there anything that you
Yeah.
say, no, that's not going to be good for a joint meeting discussion?
I think a conversation about a new planning department as a joint meeting discussion before we've had it here might be a little premature.
Mhm.
That's just my own reaction, but I'd really like to see the list.
Okay, before we,
Yeah.
because a lot of it seems to center, or can center around housing.
Right, well, the 40R, we have definitely, 70R, we've discussed, and that we do want to do, and get people going on that, haven't.
Well, and
we're
coastal
ready for that one.
resiliency can
And coastal
also
resiliency,
talk about that. So
right,
it
And
seems
the-
like there might be a lot of,
and the design standards,
Mhm.
we want to do that. So,
but it might be that we want to center those topics around the housing issue. I don't know, I'm just,
I don't know that we need to
Proposal.
center them, it's so long as
Okay.
we raise them, and if there's a connection to be made, we can make it there. But the board probably has things they want to discuss.
mhm,
We're going to get really full agenda pretty fast.
mhm.
And obviously, we want to have a workable meeting that allows us to discuss those things and
Really-
not just sort of
Yeah,
create two lists.
Right.
but you feel ready to go ahead to have a joint discussion around the planning
I
department?
don't know that.
Oh, yeah,
But it's, if I've talked to a couple of members of the board about it, it's something that's to some extent in the Board of Selectmen's strategic plan. It's been, the language has morphed on it a bit since a couple of years ago, but I just want to make sure that we've got a full, that we're making the best use of our time.
of that time, yeah, because
We're both sitting together.
the town meeting shot down the position, and that sort of ended that discussion. So there's no knowing now exactly what is meant by that, what,
And I don't think we're quite ready to trot something out, but I think that it's just one of those items that I want to just keep as an option.
mhm. Okay, we'll look for the list.
And Tom is ready to be crucified because he's got a couple of things for the town meeting, the fall town meeting, and I.
Now, we would always have all of our zoning articles sorted out, heard, and discussed prior to the warrant closing. But there are two things that I think are relatively administrative that I should have had to you earlier. One is clarifying what is the height of a building in business redevelopment. We had this discussion previously that it was 35 feet, but it didn't say 2.5 stories.
Yeah.
So that, from my perspective, is a potential housekeeping article to amend the business redevelopment bylaw that says maximum building height, 2.5 stories, not to exceed 35 feet, end of article.
You just see this as a clarification.
I do.
Yeah,
You didn't really think people were going to
because
stuff 4
2.5 stories
stories
is
in
in
there.
every other one except for business redevelopment.
So this is easy beans, it's just tacking that on to it.
Yeah, when you look at 24070, where the maximum height of the building is, it says the basic height for principal structures is 2.5 stories, not to exceed 35 feet, and for accessories, not to exceed 22 feet with the following exceptions: agricultural use, public use district, light industrial. It doesn't say anywhere that business redevelopment is an exemption to that. So I think we clarify that by adding those
Could almost
5
be
words.
done in recodification.
And the second thing that I had mentioned prior to would be removing the parking dimension.
Yeah.
This blurb that we have in our zoning bylaw, and pull that out, put it into our regulations. And they are regulations, much like our subdivision regulations, where it's not a suggestion, it's what the reg is. But the board can waive it if there's a public, if there is a public purpose that's not inconsistent with the Falmouth Town Code. So oftentimes, we have things that, like I said, design-wise, because of the conditions on the ground, they make sense. We look at Catherine Lee Bates and that extension we did to that building there, and trying to squeeze the parking around the side where we had the tree they wanted. So, those are things where it's in the zoning and it's hard to waive without going to the Zoning Board of Appeals, and the Zoning Board of Appeals goes, is this because of shape, soil, or slope? So once again, it allows us to have an identified standard and the ability to work within it based on site conditions without having to go to multiple other boards. So those are the two things that I was suggesting with my head out for the guillotine, that the board might consider proposing for a town meeting, and we'd have hearings in conjunction with those. I don't have any idea what might come in by petition. I haven't heard a whole lot. There may be some changes by petition. We have amended our petition form that says now, if you're petitioning for a zoning change, you'll have to pay for the advertising fee, because apparently that wasn't clear to everybody, because we still have a couple people who still haven't paid for some advertising fees. So we've changed the bylaw, or changed the document, so when you get this petition article, it says right on it, if you're petitioning to have a zoning change, you'll pay for the cost of advertising per zoning bylaw.
Okay. Are there any committee reports? Oh, good. Any announcements? Oh, good. General correspondence, as you have seen there, because
We had-
it's part of what was sent to you, there were a couple of letters addressed to our former chairman and disputing his understanding of things that were said in relationship to energy. And Paul, did you want? So I'm just saying that there were 2 in there, and you've all seen them, okay? Future agenda items?
Yep.
Yep. What?
We've all heard and read in the paper about the parking situation at the beaches and the traffic and all the people sitting there with cars running, the air conditioning going on. And I've been talking for years about satellite parking. You drive past Falmouth High School, I think I counted like 17 little buses sitting there idle all summer long. I'd like to maybe have a discussion at one of our meetings on how to word something to add it as an action item for the local comprehensive plan, that we really push this satellite parking for beaches and downtown and all that. We should have a shuttle system, because it's ridiculous when you're trying to go to the beach and people are just parked for, 15, 20, 30 minutes with the engines running. So it's not good for the environment, it's not good for people's tempers, and it's not good for Falmouth.
Well, as you know, Ray Jack said that's the only way the parking
Right.
problem is gonna be solved.
Right, yep.
Because we have the parking problem during the summer when we have idle buses, idle schools.
Yeah.
So, yes, I think it's really good.
I think the Board of Selectmen are trying to deal with that. I'm not exactly sure what they're doing. They're either trying to get a new committee going, but there's been some rumblings about them trying to deal with this. So it'd be a good time to reinforce our interest in having that done.
That may be a really good item to bring up
Right.
at the joint meeting.
Yeah.
That's what I'm referring to.
Oh, okay, you were bleak about it.
I'm sorry I didn't say that, but that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Would you please repeat that?
Okay, that is looking at satellite parking
I got that part, right?
Okay.
Right at the joint meeting with the selectmen.
at the joint meeting for the selectmen, with the selectmen. Okay, next meeting, August 20th, and that says, oh,
I
yes,
was trying to
yes.
say something before
What?
you.
Oh, I didn't know that, okay.
Just for your information, the planning department and the Conservation Commission submitted an application for Shivricks Pond Trail on Wednesday. And it was one of 7 applications that were approved by the Board of Selectmen. And a lot of effort went in. Tom jumped in when he came back. Charlotte was a big help, and many others too, but it was submitted on time. And we're kind of optimistic something will come of that. The intent is that Julian Sousa named Tom Bott as the liaison, and it would be a joint effort of both the planning department, not the board, the planning department and the Conservation Commission. The Conservation Commission submitted the application for the study that was done about 3 or 4 years ago, so it makes sense to follow up on that. So the total amount for all 7 projects, I think, was $2.1 million. And there was some interest on the part of the Board of Selectmen to prioritize the submissions, so not to overload town areas. And they asked the Conservation Commission to deal with that issue. And at the meeting last Wednesday that I attended, they declined and said it's up to the funding agency to determine which project goes forward. And they thought both projects, theirs and the project that's been proposed by the 300 Committee on the cleanup behind Spring Bars Road, they wouldn't pick between the 2 of those. So there are 7 projects, I believe, for $2.1 million, and we'll see what happens.
Great, okay, thank you. So next meeting, and this says tentative, but it's not tentative, correct, is August 20th.
Correct. The folks from the Cape Cod Commission are going to be here presenting their work under the DLTA grant for foreign-based code. And as we mentioned, Mr. Fox has some comments as well on density and I think some numbers that go with it. I don't want to steal his thunder, but I'm looking forward to seeing the numbers.
Right, and this is I know Jim wants to present it, and this is the appropriate venue in which to do it.
I was gonna mention one other thing, if I may.
Okay,
A week ago Friday, I attended the Regional 5-State Conference on Economic Development in New England, dealing with coastal resiliency. It was in Smithfield, Rhode Island, and Senator Whitehorse was the keynote speaker there. It was a very interesting discussion on how the different states, states are looking at coastal resiliency, and there were presentations by each state, including Massachusetts, so we had an opportunity to talk to them. And one of the questions I asked was, if you get funding for a project here, you've got to finish it by the fiscal year. By the time you notify us and we get a contract on board, there's only 6 or 7 months, and sometimes these projects take longer. Is there any interest on extending that over the next fiscal year? And both there and in Harwich, they both indicated they're gonna move forward. And the Harwich one was a 2-day session attended by Corey and
Michaela.
Say McKella. I only attended on Monday, that was the coastal resiliency part of it, but it was
You
housing
talked
second
about the
day.
One Cape?
Yeah,
The One Cape Summit.
Charlotte and I went
Oh,
on
were
the
you there?
second.
I didn't know
on
you were there.
Tuesday, yeah.
But I thought that was, the one I attended was very interesting too.
It may be interesting to have a brief report on the
I
substance
was
of that,
not
too.
bringing it up because we're trying to get out of here.
Because we're trying to get out of here, I know. I had thought about doing that, but as
I didn't
committee
know you were there.
reports.
Okay.
Actually, my presentation kind of came from being at that meeting.
Oh, I
'cause
know
what
it did.
It triggered it.
I know it did. And so I suggested to Jim very strongly that he wait until we do this because it fits better in this whole housing presentation.
Yeah,
We'll
the
find
second day was housing.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
I had some
Move to
folks
adjourn.
respond to work.
adjourned.
Go.